Chapter 1336. Xiaochen turned to look at the stage. Xianyuan Baijian thought that Xiaochen wanted to help Yunkunyo, the other chosen on the saint ranking. After all, the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect only had 2 saints on the saint ranking, and Yunkunyo was the strongest among the younger generation of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. At this time, Xiaochen could only ask for help from Yunkunyo. But so what? In Xianyuan Baijian's opinion, he didn't even need to care about Yunkunyo. There was still a gap between Yunkunyo and Xianyuan Baijian. She wasn't the strongest among the younger generation of the human race for nothing. However, Xianyuan Baijian didn't know that Xiaochen had no intention of asking Yunkunyo for help. Following Xiaochen's gaze, Long Yang, who was on the high platform, smiled bitterly. Seeing this, Yunkunyo frowned and said, "Why? Do you want to stand out? Are you willing to offend Xianyuan Baijian just because of your relationship with Xiaochen?" Yunkunyo was sitting right next to Long Yang, so she could naturally feel the change in Long Yang. However, in Yunkunyo's opinion, the relationship between Long Yang and Xiaochen was not enough for Long Yang to step in and offend Xianyuan Baijian. She thought that Xiaochen and Long Yang were just ordinary friends. However, she didn't know that there was Long Qing between the two of them. Long Qing was Xiaochen's second sister, and Long Yang was Long Qing's biological brother. Their relationship was different. In addition, Long Yang knew very well how much his father loved his sister. If the Dragon Emperor knew that he did not make a move today, he was afraid that the Dragon Emperor would not let him go. Moreover, in Long Yang's opinion, Xiaochen's talent was definitely more important than Xianyuan Baijian's in the future. Therefore, in Long Yang's opinion, offending Xianyuan Baijian for Xiaochen was worth it no matter how he looked at it. However, before Long Yang could reply, Feng Zhu had already stood up and said indifferently, "Xianyuan Baijian, you think too highly of Xianyuan Baijian? Ha, aren't you overestimating him? So what if I offend him?" After saying that, before Yunkunyo could reply, Feng Zhu took a step forward and instantly appeared on the arena. Xianyuan Baijian was known as the number 1 in the younger generation of the human race. No one in the human race dared to provoke him, but Feng Zhu didn't care about this identity at all. The reason was very simple. In Feng Zhu's opinion, this title of number 1 person in the human clan's younger generation was completely meaningless. Firstly, Feng Zhu was ranked 6th on the saint rankings. She was stronger than Xianyuan Baijian. Secondly, the Beast clan was obviously stronger than the human clan. Moreover, the Phoenix Huangyi clan was strong enough to crush the human clan. So, as the princess of the Phoenix Huangyi clan, Feng Zhu had no reason to fear Xianyuan Baijian. Originally, Xianyuan Baijian still had a dignified appearance on the stage, but suddenly, a figure appeared beside Xiaochen. She wore a red dress, had a delicate figure, and an extremely beautiful face. When such a woman appeared, Xianyuan Baijian's expression instantly changed. He stared blankly at the woman in the red dress in front of him. Xianyuan Baijian's expression slightly changed. Feng Zhu, as one of the top 10 on the saint rankings, Xianyuan Baijian naturally recognized Feng Zhu. But in the face of Xianyuan Baijian's surprise, Feng Zhu didn't give him any face at all. "I'll protect Xiaochen. Xianyuan Baijian, if you dare to lift a finger, I guarantee that you won't be able to walk out of the heavenly Yin-Yang sect today. Even if your Xianyuan ancestor comes, it'll still be the same." Feng Zhu didn't give Xianyuan Baijian any face at all. She returned Xianyuan Baijian's previous words word for word, and even became more arrogant. She said that if Xianyuan Baijian dared to make a move, she would kill him in the heavenly Yin-Yang sect today. When he saw and heard Feng Zhu's words, Xianyuan Baijian's expression turned extremely ugly. When facing Yinyangzi, Xianyuan Baijian had to be respectful, but he didn't need to care too much. Although Yinyangzi had the strength to kill him, he couldn't attack him. But Feng Zhu was different. Feng Zhu was stronger than Xianyuan Baijian, and she could attack him without any scruples. Both of them were of the younger generation, and they were both chosen on the saint rankings. Even if Feng Zhu killed Xianyuan Baijian, she wouldn't be punished by the heavenly way. Xianyuan Baijian didn't expect Fengju to appear here. When they saw Fengju appear, the Sacred Palace faction below the stage breathed a sigh of relief. Since Fengju had appeared, Xianyuan Baijian naturally had nothing to fear. Fengju, Qin Shiru's group of 4, and Long Qing were no strangers to her. After all, she and Long Yang had lived in the Heavenly Yin Sun sect for nearly a year, and everyone had interacted with her before. As for Xiaochen, who was standing behind Fengju, there was a hint of surprise in his eyes. Originally, Xiaochen wanted to let Long Yang take action, but who knew that Fengju would step forward first, and be so supportive? He was familiar with Long Yang and Fengju, and the two's existence was the real reason why Xiaochen dared to kill Bai Qiuran in front of Xianyuan Baijian. After all, Xiaochen wasn't stupid enough to think that he could fight against Xianyuan Baijian. Sometimes, having more friends was also a kind of strength. Just like now, Xianyuan Baijian was indeed stronger than Xiaochen, but so what? With Fengju here, what could Xianyuan Baijian do? The sudden appearance, the merciless words, and Fengju's attitude made Xianyuan Baijian's expression extremely gloomy. At the same time, there was a burning pain on his face, as if he had been slapped twice. With so many disciples of the Heavenly Yin Sun sect watching, Xianyuan Baijian naturally didn't want to admit defeat. After all, as the first holy son of the human race, if he admitted defeat now, wouldn't his prestige be swept to the ground in the future? The more talented a person was, the more important they were, the more they cared about their face. Xianyuan Baijian was no exception to this. Therefore, at this moment, it was absolutely impossible for Xianyuan Baijian to admit defeat. Therefore, after hearing Fengju's words, Xianyuan Baijian's face turned cold. After a moment of silence, he said coldly, "Fengju, don't be so arrogant. Fengju, don't speak too confidently. Do you think that you can keep me here by yourself?" Xianyuan Baijian said. Fengju did give Xianyuan Baijian a lot of pressure, but the difference in strength between the two was limited. Even if Xianyuan Baijian couldn't defeat Fengju, he could still protect himself. In other words, Xianyuan Baijian wasn't Fengju's opponent, but if he wanted to leave, Fengju wouldn't be able to stop him. His life wasn't in danger, so Xianyuan Baijian acted as if he had nothing to fear. However, just as Xianyuan Baijian finished speaking, a somewhat lazy and helpless voice came from the high platform. "Sigh. What if I join in? Can I make you stay?" As the voice rang out, Xianyuan Baijian's gaze immediately followed the direction of the voice. He saw that on the high platform, a young man wearing a purple gold dragon robe had already proudly stood up. He had a lazy smile on his face as he spoke. Third update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 1337. What if I join in? Will I be able to keep you here? An indifferent voice sounded from the stage. At the same time, a young man wearing a purple gold dragon robe stood proudly at the edge of the stage, looking at Xianyuan Baijian with a lazy smile. This young man was none other than Long Yang. Previously, when Fengju had appeared, Long Yang had given up on the idea of fighting. After all, Fengju was enough to suppress Xianyuan Baijian. But who would have thought that Xianyuan Baijian would have no sense of propriety? Even when Fengju appeared, Xianyuan Baijian had no intention of backing down. Hearing Long Yang's indifferent words, Xianyuan Baijian looked at the stage. Previously, Xianyuan Baijian was completely arrogant, so he naturally didn't care who was sitting on the stage. But now, with Long Yang's appearance, Xianyuan Baijian's expression couldn't be described with the word ugly anymore. With just Fengju, Xianyuan Baijian still had the ability to protect himself. But with Long Yang, it was hard to say. Although Xianyuan Baijian wasn't unfamiliar with Long Yang, he couldn't see through him at all. Long Yang was like a bottomless pit, or it could be said that Long Yang had never shown his true strength in front of him. On the Saint ranking, the top 3 were as monstrous as 3 insurmountable mountains. Among the 108 chosen on the Saint ranking, there was a huge gap between Long Yang and the other chosen on the Saint ranking in terms of strength and talent. The top 3 were like a ranking within a ranking. In a one-on-one situation, Xianyuan Baijian didn't have the slightest confidence to deal with Long Yang, let alone now that it was 2 against 1, with Feng Ju glaring at him from the side. Staring at Long Yang, under Xianyuan Baijian's gaze, Long Yang floated down from the stage and landed firmly on the stage, standing side by side with Feng Ju. With the appearance of Long Yang, Xianyuan Baijian finally felt the pressure and danger. It was a fatal danger. Feng Ju and Long Yang already had the ability to kill him, and the two of them were completely unscrupulous. They didn't have to worry about the will of the Heavenly Way's punishment, and they didn't have to fear the revenge of the Xianyuan clan. The pressure in Xianyuan Baijian's heart increased. At that moment, Feng Ju's words made Xianyuan Baijian's hair stand on end. "I want to kill this guy." As soon as he spoke, Feng Ju directly stated that he wanted to kill Xianyuan Baijian. Not only did his words cause Xianyuan Baijian's heart to clench, but even the 4 Xianyuan experts who had retreated to the side became nervous at this moment. They didn't even think about it before moving closer to Xianyuan Baijian. With Long Yang and Feng Ju joining forces, they were completely capable of killing Xianyuan Baijian. Naturally, the 4 Xianyuan experts couldn't sit idly by and watch Xianyuan Baijian be killed here. Therefore, if Long Yang and Feng Ju attacked, the 4 of them would definitely block them and think of a way to make Xianyuan Baijian leave. Of course, the 4 Xianyuan experts only dared to block them. They didn't dare to kill Long Yang and Feng Ju. Otherwise, not to mention the Dragon Clan and Huangyi Clan, the will of the Heavenly Way would immediately kill them on the spot. However, just as the 4 of them were about to make a move, several half-step great saints from the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin directly blocked their path. Seeing the experts of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin make a move, the 4 Xianyuan experts' expressions changed. The strongest among them looked at Yin Yangzi and respectfully bowed. "Senior, what is the meaning of this?" The experts of the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin must have been instructed by Yin Yangzi to block them. The Xianyuan expert asked respectfully when he saw this. Xianyuan Baijian didn't need to think too much about Yin Yangzi, but the same couldn't be said for them. However, Yin Yangzi only smiled faintly in the face of this person's respectful inquiry. "You're the one who said this is a matter between the chosen of the saint rankings, so us old fellows shouldn't meddle in other people's business. Let the young people deal with their own matters. Moreover, I don't think you're willing to be killed on the spot by the will of the Heavenly Way, right?" Yin Yangzi's voice was very calm and indifferent, but in the ears of the 4 Xianyuan experts, they felt helpless. What was this? Who knew that Long Yang and Feng Ju of the beast race would be in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin? Moreover, they had such a relationship with Xiaochen. In the end, Feng Ju had even declared that he would kill Xianyuan Wudi on the spot. If it was any other time, probably no one would believe such words. After all, there were only a mere 9 people in the younger generation who could kill Xianyuan Wudi. Moreover, even if he faced 9 people, as long as he didn't encounter one of the top 3 freaks, Xianyuan Baijian was completely capable of protecting himself and escaping. Unfortunately, he just happened to encounter Feng Ju and Long Yang in the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin. No one knew what Xianyuan Baijian's chances of escaping alive were, but the 4 Xianyuan experts didn't dare gamble. Because if Feng Ju and Long Yang were determined to kill Xianyuan Baijian, and Xianyuan Baijian just happened to be unable to escape and died on the spot, then it would absolutely be a disaster for the entire Xianyuan clan. After all, there was no second Xianyuan Wudi in the Xianyuan clan. Once Xianyuan Wudi died, then it was very likely that there would be a gap in the younger generation of the Xianyuan clan. The consequences of that were unimaginable. They didn't dare gamble, and they absolutely didn't dare let anything happen to Xianyuan Baijian. However, Yin Yangzi's meaning was very clear. This was the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin, so the 4 of them should obediently stand aside and watch the show. Without his permission, the 4 of them wouldn't be able to move a single finger. The 4 of them had no choice but to look at each other. Then, the Xianyuan expert who had spoken to Yin Yangzi earlier sighed and said, "There's nothing we can do. Send a message to the ancestor and tell him to personally come to the Taiyang sect of Heavenly Yin." What the hell was this? They came here aggressively, thinking that they could suppress all the heroes, but who knew that in the end, not only did they not get what they wanted, they even lost their lives. They had no choice but to contact the ancestor of the Xianyuan clan and ask him to personally come to rescue them. The 4 quasi-sage great venerables of the Xianyuan clan felt bitter in their hearts. On the arena, Xianyuan Baijian was also extremely furious. Of course, there was also a trace of nervousness and fear in his soaring fury. Feng Zhu's words made Xianyuan Wudi's heart tighten, and Long Yang's following words made Xianyuan Wudi feel even more humiliated. Of course, the fear in his heart became even stronger. As soon as Feng Zhu's voice fell, Long Yang stared at Xianyuan Baijian from head to toe for a long time, then pretended to be helpless and said to Feng Zhu, "Do you really want to kill him? It will be very troublesome." 4th update. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendation. Chapter 1338. Long Yang looked at Xianyuan Baijian for a while, then turned to Feng Zhu and said, "Do you really want to kill him? It'll be troublesome." In other words, as long as Long Yang was willing, he was confident he could kill Xianyuan Baijian. However, he would have to pay a great price. Hearing Long Yang's words, the fury in Xianyuan Baijian's eyes almost shot out. However, at the same time, the last bit of reason in his mind kept telling him that he couldn't be impulsive. At least, he couldn't fight Long Yang at this time. Otherwise, the consequences would be unimaginable. He didn't have the courage to fight Long Yang because he knew he wasn't Long Yang's match. Although he was furious, he was also extremely nervous. However, Xianyuan Baijian also heard the conversation between the 4 Xianyuan experts. He knew they had already sent a message to their ancestor. At this moment, Xianyuan Baijian only had one thought in his mind, and that was that his ancestor would come as soon as possible. He didn't want to fight, nor did he want to admit defeat. Xianyuan Baijian's pride didn't allow him to lower his head in front of so many people. He knew very well what the consequences would be if he lowered his head in front of Long Yang and Feng Zhu. Therefore, Xianyuan Baijian very cleverly chose to remain silent. He didn't want to fight, nor did he want to admit defeat. Facing Xianyuan Baijian's appearance, Feng Zhu said coldly, "Even if it's troublesome, I'll kill him." He still wanted to kill him. Hearing that, the disciples below the stage were all stunned. At this moment, Xianyuan Baijian couldn't remain calm. His eyes were fixed on Long Yang and Feng Zhu, guarding against any sudden attack. While Xianyuan Baijian was secretly on guard, Long Yang helplessly shook his head and smiled bitterly, "All right, but you have to fight too." "Naturally." Feng Zhu sneered. Then, their auras locked onto Xianyuan Baijian at the same time. At this moment, Xianyuan Baijian felt the hairs on his back stand. From Feng Zhu and Long Yang's eyes, Xianyuan Baijian could feel traces of the aura of death. Without any superfluous words, Feng Zhu took the initiative to attack. His palm seemed to be casually swatting out. However, as his palm swatted down, a dense black flame spread out and instantly enveloped the entire arena. Seeing that Feng Zhu had made his move, Xianyuan Baijian was the first to react. A silver-white light shot out from his body and into the sky. Soon after, the black flame and the silver-white light violently collided. While Feng Zhu and Xianyuan Baijian were fighting, Long Yang gently pushed Xiaochen out of the ring and said faintly, "Xiaochen, don't be so arrogant. Brother Xiao, you have to treat me to a drink when this is over." To Long Yang, killing Xianyuan Baijian was very troublesome, and there was no benefit to him. However, since it was related to Xiaochen, and Feng Zhu was determined to kill Xianyuan Baijian, Long Yang had no choice but to do it. Hearing Long Yang's words, Xiaochen nodded slightly in agreement. At the same time, he had no intention of rushing up to participate in the battle. Xiaochen's character was very unyielding, but this unyielding character did not mean that he was stupid. At the same time, Xiaochen was very clear about his own strength. He would not indulge in such an illusory dream. He knew that his current strength was only at the lower level of the saint ranking. Compared to Long Yang, Feng Zhu, Xianyuan Baijian, and the other top 10 saint ranking chosens, he was still inferior. For example, the black flame that Feng Zhu had unleashed was the third level of the law of undying flames. Moreover, Feng Zhu had already comprehended it to the mastery realm. A third-level law was already comparable to the law of time and the law of space. As for Xianyuan Baijian, that silver-white light should be a unique physique. However, its power was also extremely terrifying. Just by looking at the tip of the iceberg of the three people's combat strength, one could tell that Xiaoqin was not qualified to participate in such a battle. Not to mention Xiaoqin, even Yin Kunyo was only qualified to stand aside. There was no possibility of her interfering at all. It was not an exaggeration to say that in a battle between the three people, unless one was also a saint who was also ranked in the top 10 of the saint ranking, no one would be able to withstand the aftermath of the battle. Even if they did not die, they would be severely injured. Because he was very clear about his current strength and position, Xiaoqin very calmly gave up the arena to the three of them and let them settle it themselves. Xiaoqin did not feel that there was anything shameful about it. In Xiaoqian's opinion, a person had to be able to withstand wealth and wealth, but he also had to be able to withstand being looked down upon and ridiculed. Under normal circumstances, acting tough and fighting out of a moment of anger would not end well. He might even lose more face because of this. Just like now, if Xianyuan Baijian had wisely chosen to retreat when Feng Zhu appeared at the beginning, then all these things would not have happened, and Long Yang would not have appeared. Unfortunately, Xianyuan Baijian was showing off at that time and did not give Feng Zhu any face. As the princess of the Feng Huangyi clan, Feng Zhu's temper was not very good. Although she was not unruly, she definitely had a fiery temper. Therefore, Xianyuan Baijian could be said to be riding a tiger and unable to back down. At the same time, he had lost even more face. In front of tens of thousands of heavenly Yin and solar sex disciples, Xianyuan Baijian was besieged by Long Yang and Feng Zhu. When the three of them attacked, Xianyuan Baijian was directly suppressed. Fortunately, his strength was not bad and he was able to withstand a few attacks. Otherwise, he would have been beaten to the ground by Long Yang and Feng Zhu. However, even if he could withstand a few attacks, Xianyuan Baijian could still be said to be in an extremely sorry state, especially after Long Yang attacked. Compared to Feng Zhu's terrifying power of the law of undying flames, Long Yang's attack did not have such a vast aura, but it still gave off a fatal threat and an extremely mysterious feeling. Even Yin Yangzi, who was in the sky, looked at Long Yang with a hint of emotion in his eyes, and he murmured unconsciously. The law of air. To be able to make the great sage like Yin Yangzi lose his mind, one could see how terrifying Long Yang's law of air was. Unlike Yin Yangzi, most of the disciples present did not know about the law of air because it was too profound for them. However, everyone could clearly see that every time Long Yang attacked, although it was always understated, Long Yang's every move would cause a wisp of ethereal air to flow around his body. At the same time, the one who felt the most was Xianyuan Baijian. Facing Long Yang, Xianyuan Baijian's heart was already at its limit. If he had known earlier, Xianyuan Baijian would never have confronted Long Yang. 5th update, please bookmark, please recommend. Chapter 1339. Everyone knew that the most powerful laws in the world were the laws of time and the laws of space. However, they did not know that in addition to these two great laws, there were also some extremely ancient level 3 laws that very few people could comprehend. Long Yang's law of air was one of them. Air was the most basic existence in this world. Although it couldn't be seen or touched, it really existed. Moreover, for ordinary people, air was essential. Without it, they couldn't live. Although warriors were less reliant on air to a large extent, it was the same as warriors being able to stay underwater for a long time. But even so, once the surrounding air changed, it would have a huge impact on the warrior. The most important problem was that once the air became thin or dense in an instant, the surrounding pressure would obviously undergo a huge change. This was just like Long Yang's attack. Along with Long Yang's attack, the air around Xianyuan Baijian's body was almost sucked dry. Xianyuan Baijian felt as if his entire body was as light as a feather. Because the air was directly sucked dry by Long Yang, Xianyuan Baijian's body couldn't adapt to this change. Therefore, the power of his attack was obviously greatly reduced. Damn it. This was the first time Xianyuan Baijian and Long Yang fought. He couldn't help but curse in his heart. Although Feng Ju was stronger than him, Xianyuan Baijian still had the strength to fight against her. However, when facing Long Yang, Xianyuan Baijian felt as if all his strength had been wasted on cotton. He couldn't use any strength at all. Not knowing where to start was the most frustrating thing. And this was the feeling that Long Yang gave Xianyuan Baijian. The law of air made Xianyuan Baijian feel helpless. However, what Xianyuan Baijian didn't expect was that the law of air, which was almost comparable to the law of time and space, didn't only have a little ability. Long Yang gently stretched out his right palm. Then, golden spiritual energy constantly gathered on his right palm and formed a golden ball of light. Dragon breath. She still had a faint smile on her face as she spoke softly. After she finished speaking, the golden ball of light began to slowly dissipate. Soon after, it disappeared into the surrounding air. It seemed like he had done something insignificant, but with the disappearance of the golden ball of light, Xianyuan Baijian quickly felt as if something had invaded his body. The circulation of spiritual energy in his meridians began to be obstructed, and at the same time, his dantian seemed to have suffered an attack. The sudden change startled Xianyuan Baijian. He quickly put some distance between himself and Long Yang and Feng Ju, then looked inside his body. With a single glance, Xianyuan Baijian could see countless small dagger-like golden spirit energy attacking his meridians and dantian. This golden spiritual energy was exactly the same as the golden ball in Long Yang's hand, which meant that this golden spiritual energy was definitely Long Yang's doing. But how did Long Yang inject this spiritual energy into his body? Regardless of a cultivator's cultivation level, as long as they had condensed their dantian, they would have a layer of spiritual energy protecting them. Not to mention that Long Yang hadn't even touched him. Even if Long Yang's attack had hit him, he still wouldn't have been able to inject spiritual energy into his body. If he could really do this, then cultivators of the same cultivation level would only need to hit each other once to be able to inject spiritual energy into each other's body. While he was shocked, Long Yang spoke indifferently. Don't think too much. I have comprehended the law of air, so I can easily do this. Others couldn't do it, but it didn't mean that Long Yang couldn't do it. After comprehending the law of air, Long Yang could secretly inject his spiritual energy into the enemy's body through the air without any obstruction. Then, this spiritual energy would turn into countless sharp blades in the enemy's body, cutting into the enemy's meridians and dantian inch by inch. It should be known that the human body didn't only breathe through the mouth and nose, the countless pores on the body also breathed, and there was no way to control it. But after comprehending the law of air, Long Yang could easily inject spiritual energy into the enemy's body without any difficulty. Feeling the gradually increasing pain in his body, as well as the rapid suppression of his spiritual energy, Xianyuan Baijian's face became extremely ugly. Only now did he softly experience the terror of the top 3 on the Saint rankings. It was no wonder that the world acknowledged that the top 3 on the Saint rankings were on a completely different level from the other saints on the Saint rankings. This sentence wasn't wrong at all. Not to mention how strong Long Yang was. Just the fact that he had comprehended the law of air was enough to make many people helpless. Such a powerful law of air was enough to make Long Yang a nightmare for countless people. Of course, Long Yang's strength definitely wasn't limited to just this, as he was ranked 3rd on the Saint rankings. As soon as his voice fell, Long Yang turned his head to look at Feng Ju and said, "Make your move. It'll be much easier to kill him now." After saying that, a towering aura suddenly erupted from Long Yang's body. The appearance of this aura made everyone present dumbfounded. Some people even directly sat down on the ground and said with a dull expression, "That's Saint stage cultivation." That's right, at this moment, Long Yang's cultivation had clearly reached the Saint realm, which was half a realm higher than Xianyuan Baijian and Feng Ju's half-step Saint realm cultivation. Even Xiaochen was shocked by Long Yang's cultivation at this time. Long Yang had revealed his cultivation before, and he was only at the half-step Saint realm. But now, he had leaped to become a Saint realm expert. Moreover, he hadn't just entered the Saint realm, but had at least reached the Saint realm's small perfection. Obviously, Long Yang hadn't just broken through to the Saint realm. There was only one explanation, and that was that Long Yang had been hiding his cultivation all this time. His true cultivation had already reached the Saint realm from the beginning. There was actually someone who could break through to the Saint realm at such a young age. One must know that even the top 10 on the Saint rankings were all half-step saints. Everyone was shocked. Even Yin Yangzi and the other experts of the Taiyang sect in the sky couldn't believe it. How could such a young Saint realm expert be possible? Long Yang's expression didn't change much when he sensed the surprise of the people around him. He just smiled helplessly and said, "What's so strange about this? Aren't the other two monsters also in the Saint realm, brothers, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations, begging for collections?" Chapter 1340. Not only did he comprehend the terrifying law of air, but his cultivation had also reached the Saint realm. In the younger generation, there was actually someone who had reached the Saint realm. This was something that no one had dared to imagine before. However, now that they had seen Long Yang's true cultivation with their own eyes, they finally understood why the people said that the top 3 on the Saint ranking were monsters that could completely crush the other saints on the Saint ranking. This saying was not without reason. The terrifying aura from Long Yang's body constantly attacked the hearts of everyone present. And Xianyuan Baijian, who was facing Long Yang, had an extremely serious expression. He was definitely not Long Yang's opponent, and Long Yang definitely had the ability to kill him. Long Yang's cultivation had already suppressed him. Moreover, Long Yang's strength did not only lie in his cultivation and law of air. Long Yang was definitely not weak in other aspects. He was definitely not Long Yang's opponent. This was the only thought in Xianyuan Baijian's mind. Facing the shock of the surrounding people, Long Yang helplessly curled his lips and said, "Sigh, this is really troublesome." In order to kill Xianyuan Baijian, Long Yang had no choice but to use his true cultivation. This was why Long Yang felt that it was troublesome. But at this point, there was nothing to say. Since Feng Zhu wanted to kill Xianyuan Baijian, what could Long Yang say? Emitting a terrifying aura from his body, Long Yang's gaze fell on Xianyuan Baijian. He slowly stretched out his right hand and pressed down on Xianyuan Baijian from afar. Shake! Immediately, an azure dragon claw formed by spiritual energy descended from the sky, fiercely suppressing Xianyuan Baijian. The power of this palm had already surpassed Xianyuan Baijian's limit. Facing this gigantic dragon claw that was emitting a dense azure light, Xianyuan Baijian wanted to escape, but the surrounding area was filled with Feng Zhu's law of undying flames, making it impossible for Xianyuan Baijian to escape. He could only helplessly watch as the azure dragon claw mercilessly suppressed him. Without a doubt, if Long Yang's attack landed, Xianyuan Baijian would definitely be heavily injured, if not killed. The dignified first holy prince of the human race, under the joint attack of Long Yang and Feng Zhu, was practically unable to retaliate. It could be said that he was in an extremely sorry state. The cyan dragon claw violently moved towards the fighting stage. At that critical moment, when everybody thought that Xianyuan Baijian was going to lose, a cold voice spread in the air. Immediately after, a white light flashed. The white light, which was only as thick as a finger, easily hit the green dragon claw. Then, Long Yang's green dragon claw instantly dissipated, as if it had been torn apart. At the last moment, someone stepped in to save Xianyuan Baijian. Following the disappearance of the cyan dragon claw, an old man wearing a gray robe appeared in front of Xianyuan Baijian. The old man gave off a very ordinary feeling. Even his back was a little stooped. He looked like a very short and ordinary old man. Although his appearance was ordinary, no one dared to underestimate him as he stood there. The reason was simple, it was because of his identity. Xianyuan Wudi. Seeing the old man appear, Chen Ling, who was below the stage, said softly. His eyes flashed with hatred. It seemed that Qianling recognized Shan Yuan Wudi. As soon as Qianling's voice fell, Yin Yangzi, who had been watching the show from the side, appeared on the stage and looked at Shan Yuan Wudi with a smile. "Brother Wudi, are you going to interfere in the affairs of the younger generation?" Shan Yuan Wudi, the ancestor of the Shan Yuan family, was one of the three, the great sage of the human race. His strength could be said to be on par with Yin Yangzi. Previously, when Shan Yuan Wudi received the message from the four quasi-saint great sovereigns of the Shan Yuan family, he immediately rushed over. Fortunately, by relying on the speed of a great sage emperor, which could be said to be akin to teleportation, he finally managed to catch up. Just now, it was Shan Yuan Wudi who acted and saved Shan Yuan Baijian. As the young master of the Shan Yuan family, nothing could happen to Shan Yuan Baijian. Therefore, Shan Yuan Wudi naturally couldn't sit idly by. Protecting Shan Yuan Baijian behind him, Shan Yuan Wudi looked indifferently at Yin Yangzi, who had a faint smile on his face, and said calmly, "I'm only here to take Baijian away. I have no intention of interfering." Shan Yuan Wudi naturally wouldn't attack Long Yang and Feng Zhu unless he wanted to die together with them. Therefore, after saving Shan Yuan Baijian, Shan Yuan Wudi had no intention of attacking again. However, there was a trace of coldness in his eyes when he looked at Long Yang and Feng Zhu. Unfortunately, the two of them were chosen of the saint rankings. Moreover, the Dragon Clan and Huangyi Clan behind them weren't forces that the Shan Yuan family could contend against. Therefore, Shan Yuan Wudi could only give up on the idea of attacking. Being able to bring Shan Yuan Baijian back safely was already the best result. Hearing Shan Yuan Wudi's words, Yin Yangzi smiled faintly and didn't say anything else. Beside him, Long Yang and Feng Zhu also slowly withdrew their auras. Since Shan Yuan Wudi had arrived, it was naturally impossible to kill Shan Yuan Baijian today. Unless Yin Yangzi was willing to restrain Shan Yuan Wudi, however, that was obviously impossible. Although Yin Yangzi had always been on Xiao Chen's side, Long Yang and Feng Zhu were still members of the Beast Clan. Yin Yangzi could help them, but he definitely wouldn't fight Shan Yuan Wudi to the death for them. After all, Shan Yuan Wudi was the great sage of the human clan. At this moment, the 100-clan war was about to begin. The human clan could have small conflicts, but they absolutely couldn't kill each other, especially between the great sage. Therefore, Yin Yangzi definitely wouldn't attack Shan Yuan Wudi. Knowing that it was impossible to kill Shan Yuan Baijian, Long Yang didn't feel anything. However, Feng Zhu's face was full of unwillingness. However, there was nothing he could do about it. After all, this was the Taiyang sect of Tianyin, which was the territory of the human clan. It was already very difficult for Yin Yangzi to be willing to stand up and protect them. Shan Yuan Wudi's timely arrival allowed Shan Yuan Baijian to survive. However, today's matter had indeed made Shan Yuan Baijian lose face. Without saying anything more, Shan Yuan Wudi turned to look at Shan Yuan Baijian and said indifferently, "Let's go." He didn't want to stay here for a moment longer. Hearing his ancestor's words, Shan Yuan Baijian naturally didn't say anything more. However, before leaving, Shan Yuan Baijian first looked at Long Yang and Feng Zhu with deep fear in his eyes. Then, he turned his gaze to Xiao Chen. The hatred in his eyes was extremely strong. At the same time, he said coldly, "Xiao Chen, do you think there will always be someone who can protect you? At the human clan assembly, I'd like to see who can stop you." With that, without waiting for Xiao Chen's reply, Shan Yuan Baijian left with his ancestor. This time, the experts of the Taiyang sect of Tianyin didn't stop them and allowed them to leave. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1341. The experts from the Shan Yuan clan left, but Qianling's expression was very ugly. To be more precise, it was because Qianling's expression had become extremely ugly after seeing Shan Yuan Wudi. Sensing the change in Qianling, Xiao Chen had already arrived beside the sacred palace group. He did not ask any questions. After all, there were too many people here and it was not the time to talk about such things. However, based on Qianling's identity, Xiao Chen could guess that Qianling and the current ancestor of the Shan Yuan clan, Xianyuan Wudi, probably knew each other. There might even be some sort of relationship between the two. Qianling's expression did not change much. With the departure of the Xianyuan clan, the battle of life and death between Xiaochen and Baichuran finally came to an end. The process could be said to be full of twists and turns, and the result could be said to be unexpected. However, Baichuran's death and Xianyuan Baijian's retreat were indisputable facts. It could be said that Xiaochen had finally achieved his goal today. Therefore, at this very moment, the gazes of many disciples were locked onto Xiaochen. They all knew that after this battle, Xiaochen would firmly replace Baichuran's position in the heavenly yin-yang sect and become one of the two chosen on the saint rankings. Under everyone's gazes, the familiar light screen appeared in the sky once more. Xiaochen's name, which was originally ranked 102nd on the saint rankings, emitted a burst of light and quickly replaced Baichuran's 93rd position. After killing Baichuran with his own hands, Xiaochen naturally replaced him on the saint ranking. As for Baichuran's name, it was only natural that her name was removed from the saint ranking due to Xiaochen's death. Following the change in Xiaochen's ranking, the saint rankings also changed once more. The various clans of the Central World were the first to learn of this change. After all, every time the saint rankings light screen appeared, everyone in the Central World could see it clearly no matter where they were. They had already paid special attention to Xiaochen, the new son of the human race on the saint ranking. In just a few days, Xiaochen had risen from the 102nd place to the 93rd place on the saint ranking. This made the cultivators of the 100 races pay even more attention to him. At the same time, some quickly guessed that Baichuran was probably dead because his name had vanished from the hallowed rankings. There was only a single explanation for that. Baichuran was dead, and Xiaochen had taken her place. It was obvious who had killed Baichuran. Countless people guessed the whole story. Some were shocked, some were indifferent, and some were disdainful. Of course, there were also people who were furious. In White Moon City, in the Bai family's mansion, the patriarch and father of Baichuran and Baichuyue, Bai Mushuang, sat in the main hall with a gloomy face. His expression was so gloomy that it was somewhat ferocious as he looked at the experts of the Bai family below him. He gritted his teeth and spoke word by word. Churan is dead, and it's that damned Xiaochen again. He's killed 2 of my sons. I, Bai Mushuang, will definitely kill him. How could Bai Mushuang not be furious that both his sons had died at the hands of Xiaochen? His heart was already filled with rage. If it were not for the slightest bit of rationality left in him, he probably would have killed his way to the Taiyang sect of heavenly yin long ago. Bai Mulan sighed silently when he heard that. Out of everyone present, he was the only one who had seen Xiaochen with his own eyes. He knew how talented Xiaochen was. He originally thought that the Bai family had taken Xiaochen seriously enough, but who would have thought that they would still underestimate Xiaochen's strength in the end? Even Xianyuan Baijian had failed to save Baichuran's life. The Bai family naturally knew that Baichuran had contacted Xianyuan Baijian. They originally thought that with Xianyuan Baijian holding the fort, Baichuran's life would not be in danger even if something unexpected happened. Who would have thought that Baichuran would still die in the end? It could be said that Xiaochen had single-handedly destroyed the hope of the entire Bai family. Without Baichuran, there was no one in the younger generation of the Bai family who could carry the banner of the Bai family. This was undoubtedly a heavy blow to the Bai family. As the cold shout rang out, the faces of the Bai clan's experts turned cold. At the same time, Bai Mulan, who had been silent all this while, spoke in a deep voice. Big brother, we can either not provoke Xiaochen, or we have to give him a thunderous blow. We can't give him any time to grow. Bai Mulan knew how fast Xiaochen grew. Now that Baichuran was dead, the Bai family only had 2 choices. The first was to forget the enmity of the past or even stop thinking about revenge and take the initiative to befriend Xiaochen. Perhaps this way, they might be able to bury the hatchet. Besides that, if the Bai family wanted to avenge Baichuran, then Bai Mulan believed that they had to kill Xiaochen with a thunderous blow. They absolutely could not allow Xiaochen any time to grow after becoming enemies with Baichuran. Otherwise, the entire Bai family would fall into eternal damnation. They could either swallow their anger and take the initiative to make peace, or they could strike like a thunderous blow and kill Xiaoqin in a single strike. This was the advice Bai Milan gave Bai Mushuang. Killing intent surged in Bai Mushuang's eyes when he heard his younger brother's words. Take the initiative to make peace? I've already said that if I don't kill Xiaoqin, how can I face my children, Chiron and Chouyue? It was definitely impossible to make peace, so they had to strike like a thunderous blow and kill Xiaoqin in a single strike. Bai Milan said solemnly, if that's the case, big brother, you have no choice but to make a decision. Xiaoqin is now a chosen on the saint rankings. There aren't many people in the younger generation who can kill him, so our Bai family can only pay a price and have the older generation take action and kill him with a thunderous blow. Xiaoqin's strength was naturally something that only 5 people in the younger generation of the Bai family could match. Therefore, Bai Milan's idea was very simple. He wanted the older generation of the clan to kill Xiaoqin. Although the person who did this would definitely pay with his life for Xiaoqin and be punished by the heavenly way, there was no other way. Since they were going to make a move, they couldn't give Xiaoqin the slightest chance. Bai Mushuang didn't immediately agree to Bai Milan's suggestion. In order to kill Xiaoqin, they would need at least a saint. Moreover, 1 saint wasn't enough. They would need at least 2. Using the lives of 2 saints to exchange for Xiaoqin's life was a hefty price for the Bai clan. After all, there were not many saints in the Bai clan. The death of 1 saint meant 1 less saint in the Bai clan. After weighing the pros and cons, Bai Mushuang finally decided to kill Xiaoqin. He couldn't swallow his anger if he didn't vent it. Seeing the change in Bai Mushuang's expression, Bai Milan naturally guessed his elder brother's decision. At the same time, Bai Milan's words shocked Bai Mushuang again. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1342. In Bai Mushuang's opinion, exchanging the lives of 2 saints for Xiaoqin's life was already an extremely painful matter. However, Bai Mushuang gritted his teeth and accepted it for the sake of avenging his sons. But right when he'd just made his decision, Bai Mushuang's expression couldn't help but change when he heard Bai Mushuang's words. Big brother, since you've made your decision, then in my opinion, we need at least 5 saints and a few dozen half-saints and Dao Emperor realm cultivators to ensure that we can kill Xiaoqin. Only then would we have absolute confidence in killing Xiaoqin. After knowing Bai Mushuang's decision, Bai Mushuang expressed his opinion. Once those words were spoken, Bai Mushuang's expression changed. However, Bai Mushuang clearly didn't know that Bai Mushuang originally wanted to say that it was best to let a quasi-saint Grand Exalt do it. But when he thought about it, the Bai clan only had 3 quasi-saint Grand Exalts, so it was obviously impossible to exchange their lives for Xiaoqin's life. Even if Bai Mushuang agreed, the Bai clan's ancestor wouldn't. So, after taking a step back, Bai Mushuang still felt that it was impossible for a quasi-saint Grand Exalt to exchange his life for Xiaoqin's. In that way, they could only use the lives of saints. But even so, the outcome still shocked Bai Mushuang to the extreme. It wasn't just him, the gazes of all the experts of the Bai clan were filled with surprise and bewilderment as they looked at Bai Mushuang. Third brother, aren't you making a mountain out of a molehill? Does killing Xiaoqin require such a formidable force? Bai Mushuang asked with shock as he gazed at Bai Mushuang. The Bai clan had to pay the price of at least 5 saints, a few dozen half-saints, and Dao Emperor realm experts just to kill Xiaoqin. Wasn't this a little too exaggerated? After all, such a force was practically a fifth of the Bai clan's entire combat strength. At the very most, the Bai clan only had a little over 20 saints, and this was the result of accumulating strength for countless years. Yet they had to lose 5 of them in one go. Even if it wasn't a calamity to the Bai clan, it was sufficient to deal a heavy blow. He felt that Bai Milan was making a mountain out of a molehill. However, Bai Milan said solemnly to the doubts of his elder brother and everyone present. Big brother, everyone, I'm not making a mountain out of a molehill, nor am I exaggerating. I've seen Xiaoqin with my own eyes. It can be said that if a saint attacks, Xiaoqin will definitely be able to kill him. If two saints attack, Xiaochen will definitely be able to retreat safely. Even if 3 or 4 saints attack, they might not be able to kill Xiaochen. And we only have one chance. If we don't succeed this time, then given how much the yin and yang sects value Xiaochen, our Bai clan won't have another chance. Everyone, just think about it. If you offend a current prodigy but fail to kill him before he has matured, what will the outcome be? At that time, our Bai clan probably won't just pay the price of 5 saints. Our entire Bai clan will probably cease to exist. After this incident, Bai Mulan's attention to Xiaochen could be said to have risen to a very high level. Therefore, he believed that if he wanted to kill Xiaochen, he must be willing to pay the price. Otherwise, he would only go for wool and come home shorn. At that time, Xiaochen would definitely retaliate. Once Xiaochen matured, the Bai clan would clearly not be able to endure Xiaochen's revenge. Putting everything else aside, once Xiaochen gained a foothold in the yin and yang sects, the Bai clan's days would become very difficult. At that time, Xiaochen would only need to say a single word, and many organizations would probably step forward to deal with the Bai clan for Xiaochen. His tone was very solemn, and he didn't seem to be joking at all. Bai Mushuang and the other members of the Bai clan fell into deep thought when they heard Bai Mulan. Bai Mulan was right. They only had one chance. Presently, Xiaochen and the yin and yang sects were still unaware that the Bai clan intended to take revenge on Xiaochen, so they weren't on guard. Once they attacked and Xiaochen was allowed to escape, then it would be very difficult to find another opportunity. The yin and yang sects would definitely dispatch forces to protect Xiaochen. At that time, the Bai clan wouldn't have any chance to act. They had to succeed in a single strike, otherwise, the Bai clan would definitely suffer annihilation. After pondering deeply for a short while, Bai Mushuang gritted his teeth and decided in the end. We'll do as third brother says. However, I've decided to dispatch 7 saints, 30 half-saints, and 70 Dao emperors to kill Xiaochen. We must succeed in a single strike. The enmity of his son's death had gained the upper hand in the end, and Bai Mushuang spoke coldly. Moreover, he'd even added the strength to kill Xiaochen on top of Bai Mulan's strength. 7 saints, 30 half-saints, and 70 Dao emperors. All of them were acting solely for the sake of killing Xiaochen. Moreover, once they made a move against Xiaochen, then it was no surprise that all 107 of them would definitely perish. Using the lives of 107 experts in exchange for Xiaochen's life clearly showed how deep Bai Mushuang's hatred towards Xiaochen was. Bai Mushuang made the decision. The curtains to a trap that was meticulously planned by the Bai clan to target Xiaochen had silently begun. However, Xiaochen was utterly unaware of all of this. At this moment, after Xiaochen killed Bai Qiuran and forced Xianyuan Baijian to retreat, they'd returned to the cave and gathered together to chat with each other. Bai Qiuran was dead, so all of them were naturally much more relaxed. From now onwards, the Sacred Palace faction could be said to possess the right to speak in the heavenly yin-yang sect. It was even to the extent that the Sacred Palace faction had become a faction that was second only to the main faction after this battle. The reason was very simple: besides the main faction, only the Sacred Palace faction possessed a chosen on the hallowed rankings. The other factions didn't possess a chosen on the hallowed rankings. They heaved a sigh of relief in their hearts. At the same time, they naturally drank to celebrate Xiaochen's ascension onto the hallowed rankings. The atmosphere was very lively. Long Yang chuckled as he sat by Xiaochen's side during the banquet. A wretched smile hung on the corners of his mouth as he gazed at the busy Qingyao, Qingluo, Fei Mei, and Lan, Si Ju, and Lu Zhu. Qingyao and Qingluo are getting more and more beautiful. Long Yang purposely put on a lecherous expression, but Xiaochen didn't mind at all. He merely rolled his eyes at Long Yang. However, it was Feng Zhu who spoke up. Xiaochen, it looks like Xianyuan Baijian has his eyes on you this time. I'm afraid he won't stop targeting you in the future. Xianyuan Baijian wasn't a match for Long Yang and Feng Zhu, so he naturally shifted his hatred onto Xiaochen. Xiaochen naturally knew this, but before Xiaochen could reply, Long Yang spoke up nonchalantly. Only mediocre people don't attract jealousy. It's very normal for Xianyuan Baijian to target Brother Xiaochen, but I'm sure Brother Xiaochen won't mind, right? We'll just deal with whatever comes our way. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1343. Xianyuan Baijian had revealed killing intent towards Xiaochen before he left. Even an idiot could tell that he hated Xiaochen. Since he wasn't a match for Long Yang and Feng Zhu, Xianyuan Baijian naturally blamed everything on Xiaochen. Xiaochen felt rather helpless about this. What was this? Bullying the weak and fearing the strong? However, this was also normal. Xianyuan Baijian clearly wasn't an idiot. Thus, blaming everything on Xiaochen was also something to be expected. Long Yang didn't care about this at all. In Long Yang's opinion, Xiaochen would replace Xianyuan Baijian as the first holy son of the human race sooner or later. When Yin Kunyo had taken the initiative to come to Long Yang to discuss an alliance, Long Yang had already said that it wasn't impossible for the holy sons of the beast race and human race to form an alliance. However, Yin Kunyo wasn't qualified to discuss it, and neither was Xianyuan Baijian. From Long Yang's point of view, the alliance between the chosen of the beast race and the human race could only be discussed after Xiaochen replaced Xianyuan Baijian's position. Long Yang was only willing to discuss this matter with Xiaochen. Xianyuan Baijian and Yin Kunyo were not qualified. Disregarding everything else, just in terms of talent, Long Yang completely crushed the two of them. If they weren't on the same level, what was there to discuss? Hearing Long Yang's words, Xiaochen unhappily scolded, "That's hard to say. Right now, I'm not a match for Xianyuan Baijian. If he comes looking for trouble, I'll have to trouble Brother Long Yang first." Xiaochen's words were clearly a joke, but at the same time, it was also a fact. Indeed, if Xiaochen and Xianyuan Baijian were to clash head-on, Xiaochen definitely wouldn't be able to win. Thus, during this period of time, Xiaochen didn't hesitate to hug Long Yang's thigh. In any case, Long Yang couldn't refuse. If he didn't agree, then he could go find his second sister, Long Qing, and have Long Qing talk to the Dragon Emperor. It could be said that he had a death grip on Long Yang's lifeline. Hearing this, Long Yang fiercely drank a mouthful of wine and said, "You don't want me to stay by your side forever, do you? Doesn't that make me a personal bodyguard? That's not necessary. How would I dare to restrict Brother Long Yang's freedom? It's fine as long as you help me when you're by my side. As for when you're not around, I naturally won't be so stupid as to fight to the death with Xianyuan Baijian. After all, people take turns. It's fine to let him be arrogant for a few years." Xiaochen laughed. As he spoke, Xiaochen glanced at Qianling, who had been drinking alone in the corner of the courtyard. After greeting Long Yang and the others, he walked over to Qianling with a jug of wine. Ever since Xianyuan Wudi appeared, Qianling's mood seemed to be very low. Walking over to Qianling's side, Xiaochen minded his own business and poured a cup of wine for each of them. Then, he clinked his cup with Qianling's and drank it all in one gulp. After the wine entered his stomach, Xiaochen breathed out a mouthful of wine in comfort. Very naturally, he sat beside Qianling and asked in a seemingly casual manner, "Big brother, do you know the Xianyuan ancestor?" Naturally, there was no need for the brothers to beat around the bush. Therefore, Xiaochen asked very naturally. Hearing this, Qianling had no intention of hiding anything. He smiled and slowly said, "My real name is Xianyuan Wudi. I should say in my previous life. My name was Xianyuan Ling. I've told you and second sister before that I was once one of the 3 great elders of the Xianyuan clan. My cultivation base was at the limit of the half-saint great sovereign. My battle strength could also be said to be at the strongest level among the half-saint great sovereigns. At that time, Xianyuan Wudi had yet to break through to the great sage realm. Like me, he was also one of the 3 great elders. Back then, both of us were ranked on the holy rankings. Although our rankings weren't high and were only in the 80th place, we were still considered to be outstanding talents. As we were cousins and grew up together, my relationship with Xianyuan Wudi was very good since we were young. But I didn't expect that he actually, speaking until here." Qianling paused. A glint of hatred flashed in his eyes. Then, he took a big gulp of wine and continued, but his voice was obviously much hoarser. After becoming one of the 3 great elders of the Xianyuan clan, I met a woman. She was a peerless beauty and was an elder of the Haotian Alliance. It was a coincidence that we met, but after getting along with each other, we fell in love with each other. After getting together with her, the 3 of us, she, Xianyuan Wudi, and I often traveled together to search for the possibility of breaking through to the great sage. Xianyuan Wudi knew that I loved her very much. But no one expected that when we went out to train, the 3 of us accidentally broke into a ruin. There, we found some records and treasures about breaking through to the great sage. Who would have thought that Xianyuan Wudi would want to kill me and her in the face of such an opportunity? However, the 3 of us are equal in strength. It's clearly impossible for Xianyuan Wudi to kill me and her by himself. So, Xianyuan Wudi poisoned us with the 100 Ghosts devouring heart powder. It was a highly toxic poison of the Ghost Clan. No one below the Great Sage could resist it. Even the 100 Poison's impenetrable body was useless. At that time, I treated Xianyuan Wudi as a brother and didn't guard against him at all. So, it was easy for Xianyuan Wudi to succeed. She was poisoned and unconscious. I wanted to fight with Xianyuan Wudi, but we couldn't do anything to each other. In the end, Xianyuan Wudi told me that the Dragon Clan could save her, but she had been poisoned by the 100 Ghosts devouring heart powder. She only had half a month at most. She asked me if I wanted to fight to the death with him here. At that time, I really wanted to kill Xianyuan Wudi, but she didn't have time. In the end, I took her out of the secret realm and went to the Beast Clan. After that, the incident with the Dragon Clan happened. Qinling said slowly. After hearing this, Xiaochen finally understood Qinling's secret. To put it bluntly, if it wasn't for Xianyuan Wudi, Qinling wouldn't have been reborn, and he wouldn't have been stranded in the Northern Star Realm's Tianqin continent. In order to break through to the Great Sage, Xianyuan Wudi betrayed his brother, causing Qinling to almost die. But now, it seemed that Xianyuan Wudi had succeeded because he was now the ancestor of the Xianyuan clan, the Great Sage. Xiaochen did not know how to comfort Qinling sitting beside Qinling. Xiaochen also finished the wine in his cup in one gulp. Then, he poured another cup for the 2 of them and said in a calm voice. Big brother, if you want to do anything, just do it. Second sister and I will always be behind you. Even if you want to overthrow the entire Xianyuan clan, second sister and I will definitely not be absent. Xiaochen didn't try to persuade Qinling. No matter who it was, they wouldn't be able to forget this kind of thing. As a brother, the only thing he could do was stand by Qinling's side. No matter what happened, he would stand firmly by Qinling's side. Please add me to your collection. Please recommend me. Chapter 1344. Xiaochen didn't say much after learning about Qinling's experience back then. He simply stayed by Qinling's side. When Qinling heard Xiaochen's words, he turned his head and the 2 brothers looked at each other. Qinling then raised his wine cup and drained it with Xiaochen. Alright, let the 3 of us turn the Xianyuan clan upside down. I must give her an explanation for what happened back then. Qinling had lived 2 lives, but he had only loved one person from beginning to end, and that was her. Her name was Xia Qingcheng. Xianyuan Ling hadn't been able to save her in his previous life, so Qinling would seek justice for her in this life. He knew what Qinling meant. If he wanted to seek justice for Xia Qingcheng, he would have to face Xianyuan Wudi directly. Xianyuan Wudi was the ancestor of the Xianyuan clan. Going against him was equivalent to going against the entire Xianyuan clan. But so what? Xiaochen wasn't afraid of the Xianyuan clan. Although the 3 siblings were only 3 grasshoppers in front of the Xianyuan clan right now, there would be a day when Xiaochen and the other 2 would be able to single-handedly overthrow the entire Xianyuan clan. That night, everyone drank merrily. But the happiest of all would naturally be Long Qi and Long Kuei. It was the first time the 2 sisters had left the Dragon Clan, and now that they had so many friends, they naturally had a lot of fun. In the end, the two of them were drunk to the point of unconsciousness. It was Qing Yao and Qing Luo who helped them sleep. After a night of revelry and Baichuran's death, the Sacred Palace faction's life quickly returned to normal. Everyone was working hard on their cultivation. It had been some time since they joined the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect, and the Sacred Palace faction had gradually adapted to life in the Central World and the Heavenly Yin Taiyang sect. Moreover, under the influence of the rich martial arts culture in the Central World, the Sacred Palace faction's strength had also improved by leaps and bounds. Not to mention others, just Chenling, Long Qing, and Qin Yu already possessed the qualifications to ascend the saint rankings. Their strength was absolutely not inferior to Long Yu, who had once fought with Xiao Chen. He already possessed the strength to ascend the saint ranking. However, the three of them were clearly not too concerned about this. The saint ranking held no attraction to them, especially Qin Yu. Qin Yu's laziness was even more exaggerated than Wang Yang's. Perhaps it was because of their similar personalities that after a few days, Long Yang and Qin Yu were like two brothers. It was a pity that they hadn't met earlier. Every day, the two of them would be drinking in the courtyard, paying no attention to anything else. Once again immersed in cultivation, everyone's days were peaceful and fulfilling. As for Xiao Chen, he naturally did not idle around. During the battle with Baichuran, he had luckily comprehended the sword domain. During this period of time, Xiao Chen had spent most of his energy on consolidating his sword domain. It could be said that he had comprehended the sword domain by chance. Xiao Chen's comprehension of the sword domain was definitely not proficient, and could even be said to be very shallow. However, this was not a big problem. Everything was difficult at the beginning. Now that he had comprehended the sword domain, he only needed to put in a little more effort to consolidate it. In just half a month, Xiao Chen had successfully pushed his sword domain to the beginner level. Compared to before, he was obviously much more adept at using it. Strength was king. In the Central World, everything was based on strength. This was something that Xiao Chen understood very well. More than half a month had passed while Xiao Chen was cultivating without hearing anything about the outside world. Late one night, Xiao Chen was still cultivating in his room with his eyes closed as usual. The night was dark. However, in such an ordinary night, in an ordinary house in an inconspicuous village closest to the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect, two black-robed figures were sitting opposite each other. Through the faint light, one could see that these two people were actually Bai Mushuang and He Tao, the hall master of the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect's mission hall. He Tao was the hall master of the mission hall of the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect. With a cultivation of half-step great saint, he was considered a high-ranking figure in the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect. However, at this moment, he was actually sitting together with Bai Mushuang. Moreover, from the looks of the two, this meeting should be extremely secretive. Apart from the two of them, no one else knew about it. Logically speaking, Bai Mushuang couldn't be on the same level as He Tao in terms of status and cultivation. However, the old ancestor of the Bai family and He Tao had some friendship. Of course, this friendship could also be understood as some blackmail. After all, as a major figure in the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect, it was impossible for He Tao to be completely unscathed. And these things happened to have the shadow of the Bai family in them. Therefore, with these things, the Bai family and He Tao naturally became nominal allies. The Bai family would look for He Tao if they couldn't handle anything in the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect. Sometimes, if He Tao wanted to do something shady, he would also use the Bai family to deal with it. The two sides could be said to be using and relying on each other. Sitting opposite each other, He Tao looked at Bai Mushuang in front of him and said faintly, "Tell me, what is it that can make you come to me personally?" Last night, He Tao had received a secret letter from Bai Mushuang, asking him to meet here tonight. He didn't know what Bai Mushuang was up to, but since Bai Mushuang had personally come here, it seemed that this matter wasn't going to be simple. He Tao had already guessed it. Hearing He Tao's words, Bai Mushuang's eyes flashed with killing intent. Then he said coldly, "It's not difficult. I just want Master Yi to do me a favor and force Xiao Chen to leave the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect alone. It's best if he goes to a place where there are no people. Give Xiao Chen a mandatory mission, and it would be best if he had to go to a place where no one would go. As soon as Bai Mushuang said this, He Tao immediately understood what he meant. The Bai family wanted to make a move on Xiaochen. They didn't have a chance in the heavenly yin-yang sect, so they wanted to do it while Xiaochen was out on a mission. It was indeed a vicious plan, but the target was Xiaochen. This made He Tao's face sink. He said coldly, "Bai Mushuang, does your Bai family want to die? Don't you know Xiaochen's current status? I can guarantee that if your Bai family dares to make a move on Xiaochen, once this matter is exposed, even that old man Baishan won't be able to protect your Bai family." The Bai family was simply too audacious. Xiaochen's current status was already known to everyone, and the importance that Yinyangzi attached to Xiaochen was obvious to all. If anyone dared to attack Xiaochen at this time, they could imagine the consequences even if they used their toes to think. If Yinyangzi, a great saint emperor, was angered, even 10 Bai families wouldn't be able to withstand it, let alone a single Bai family. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1345. The Bai clan actually wanted to assassinate Xiaochen, which was simply courting death. As soon as he finished speaking, He Tao rejected without hesitation, "Impossible, I will not issue such a mission. I also advise the Bai clan to give up on this idea, otherwise the Bai clan will not be able to bear the consequences." He Tao was not a fool to participate in the assassination of Bai clan Xiaochen. Naturally, he would not agree. Bai Mushuang was not surprised when he heard He Tao's words. He seemed to have expected He Tao to answer like this. The corner of his mouth revealed a sneer. This sneer seemed a little crazy. He Tao couldn't help but frown slightly. "Master He, my Bai clan only needs you to arrange a mission for Xiaochen. As for the rest, you don't need to show up. Even if they investigate, they won't be able to trace it back to you. Moreover, with our relationship, Master He is so heartless. This is a little hurtful. At that time, it's hard to guarantee that those things won't fall into the hands of Punishment Hall's Qin Guang. With Qin Guang's character, Master He should know what it means if those things fall into his hands." In order to take revenge, Bai Mushuang could be said to have thrown caution to the wind. He even did not hesitate to threaten He Tao. As for the Qin Guang mentioned by Bai Mushuang, he was really the master of Punishment Hall of Heavenly Yin-Yang sect. Although he was also a half-step great sage like He Tao was far from being Qin Guang's opponent in terms of personal strength and authority. The gap between the two was not small. Hearing Bai Mushuang's words, He Tao's face immediately sank. He shouted coldly, "Bai Mushuang, are you threatening me?" Master He misunderstood. "How dare I threaten you? I just need a small favor from Master He. I hope Master He won't refuse." Bai Mushuang smiled ferociously when he heard He Tao's words. All He Tao needed to do was to arrange a mission for Xiaochen. As for the rest, he didn't need to do it. The missions of Heavenly Yin-Yang sect were divided into 2 categories. One was the mission that one had to take the initiative to accept, and the other was the compulsory mission. It was easy to understand the free mission that one took the initiative to accept. It was free to choose. There was no coercion. After completing the mission, the disciple would get the corresponding reward. As for the second type of compulsory missions, to put it bluntly, they were some special missions that had to be completed by the designated personnel of the mission hall. Once such a mission was issued, under normal circumstances, the disciples would not be able to refuse. For example, if the difficulty of a mission exceeded the scope of an ordinary disciple, the mission hall would categorize it as a compulsory mission, and it required the holy disciples of the holy rankings to take action. In that case, regardless of whether they found Xiaochen or Yun Kunyo, both of them would have to accept this mission. As Bai Mushuang had said, given He Tao's status, it was not strange for him to arrange a compulsory mission for Xiaochen. Of course, even if that was the case, He Tao did not want to agree to Bai Mushuang's request. The reason was that it was very dangerous. If it was an ordinary disciple, He Tao would definitely not hesitate or worry. However, his target was Xiaochen. He knew very well that if Xiaochen died, the matter would definitely not end well. the upper echelons of the heavenly Yin-Yang sect, whether it was Yin-Yangzi or Qin Guang of the Punishment Hall, would definitely investigate to the end. At that time, if they found any clues, He Tao would definitely be dead. However, He Tao did not seem to have any other choice. If he did not agree to Bai Mushuang's request, he would definitely die once the Bai family's things fell into Qin Guang's hands. If he helped, he might be able to escape by luck. However, if he did not help, it would only be a life and death struggle. It wasn't that he didn't think of killing Bai Mushuang on the spot. But what was the use of killing Bai Mushuang? Those things obviously wouldn't be with Bai Mushuang. And once Bai Mushuang died, someone from the Bai family would naturally hand those things over to Qin Guang. There was no other choice. After pondering for a long time, He Tao finally said coldly, "Fine, I can help you. However, this is the last time. After this matter, those things must be handed over to me. From then on, I will no longer have any relationship with the Bai family." In the end, He Tao chose to agree. However, he also stated his own conditions. Those things could not be in the Bai family's hands. Otherwise, he would be threatened by the Bai family for the rest of his life. He Tao had even decided that as long as the Bai family handed those things over to him, he would find an opportunity to destroy the entire Bai family. Only dead people could keep secrets the best. Hearing He Tao's words, Bai Mushuang did not hesitate. He immediately smiled and nodded. "Deal. May I know when Lord He can arrange it? Just wait for my news." Hearing this, He Tao coldly replied. Immediately, he disappeared from the spot. Tonight's meeting made He Tao very unhappy. However, he had no choice but to follow Bai Mushuang's request. Fortunately, he only needed to arrange a compulsory mission for Xiao Chen. As for the rest, he would leave it to the Bai family to deal with. He did not need to intervene at all, nor did he need to be involved in anything. No one knew about the secret meeting between He Tao and Bai Mushuang. 3 days had passed since that night. On this evening, Xiao Chen had just finished a day of cultivation. He was chatting with Qin Shuru and the other 3 girls in the garden. However, at this moment, Fei Mei walked in and bowed to everyone. "Young master, the people from the mission hall are here. They said that there is a compulsory mission that only the chosen on the saint list can accept. The mission hall has chosen young master." Compulsory mission? Hearing Fei Mei's words, Xiao Chen's expression did not change much. He asked indifferently, "Where is he?" "In the front hall." Fei Mei replied. It was normal for people from the mission hall to come. However, Xiao Chen did not realize that this seemingly ordinary compulsory mission was actually hiding something. Under Fei Mei's lead, Xiao Chen came to the front hall. Here, Xiao Chen saw a deacon from the mission hall. When he saw Xiao Chen, the deacon bowed respectfully. "Greetings, chosen Xiao Chen." As a chosen on the saint list, Xiao Chen's status was naturally not something a small deacon could compare with. Therefore, in front of Xiao Chen, the deacon was very respectful. Of course, the deacon obviously did not know that the compulsory mission in his hand was actually a trap set to kill Xiao Chen. Early in the morning, he received an order from He Tao saying that there was a mission that only the chosen on the saint list could complete. Since Yan Kunyo did not have the time, he could only force Xiao Chen to handle it. The deacon did not have the slightest suspicion. After all, such matters were not uncommon in the mission hall. Therefore, after receiving the mission, the deacon did not look at the mission's content and directly went to Xiao Chen's cave dwelling. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1346. He bowed respectfully to Xiao Chen, then handed over an unopened letter to Xiao Chen. The contents of the mission were recorded in the letter. Xiao Chen didn't think too much about it. After receiving the letter, he thanked the attendant and Fei Mei personally escorted him out of the cave dwelling. The mission hall had arranged a compulsory mission for him. Xiao Chen didn't have much resistance to it. After all, he had been in the Heavenly Yin Solar sect for a long time, and the Heavenly Yin Solar sect had treated the sacred palace very well over the years. Even now, Xiao Sheng and the other three were still cultivating in the heavenly Yin solar sect's secret cultivation realm, hoping to break through to the advanced quasi-saint stage as soon as possible. After receiving so many benefits, it was indeed time for him to do something. Therefore, Xiaochen directly accepted the mission without any hesitation. After opening the letter, Xiaochen immediately understood the mission's contents. It wasn't a very difficult mission. The mission only required Xiaochen to find a saint-grade spirit herb, the heavenly sunflower. The reason why the chosen of the saint ranking was needed was because the heavenly sunflower grew in a very special place. In the human race's territory, the heavenly sunflower only existed in the land of 100 rivers, and the land of 100 rivers could be said to be the most chaotic place in the human race's territory. Because of the geographical environment, there were many prisoners on death row who had committed crimes in the human race's territory. They had all fled there. These prisoners gathered together and formed many gangs. These gangs could be said to have committed all kinds of crimes, and at the same time, they were very bold. They weren't afraid of the disciples of the various sects at all, and killed them without hesitation. Therefore, to find the heavenly sunflower, one had to go deep into the land of 100 rivers. In order to protect oneself in the land of 100 rivers, it was best to let the chosen of the saint ranking personally go there. The land of 100 rivers, heavenly sunflower. The mission's records were very detailed. After reading it, a wave of spiritual energy emerged and instantly destroyed the letter. Now that he knew the content and requirements of this mission, Xiaochen didn't think too much about it. After returning to the backyard, he told Qin Shuru and the other two girls about the mission. Hearing that Xiaochen wanted to go to the land of 100 rivers, the four girls naturally clamored to follow Xiaochen, but they were rejected by Xiaochen. There's nothing in the land of 100 rivers. Why are you coming with me? Stay in the heavenly Yin-Yang sect. The free time limit given by Patriarch Yin-Yang-Zi is almost up. Take this last chance to cultivate properly. Yin-Yang-Zi had promised Xiaochen that she would allow the Holy Palace disciples to use the cultivation mystic realms of the heavenly Yin and solar sect for free for a year. Now that there were less than 3 months left, Xiaochen naturally wouldn't allow the four women to follow him to the land of 100 rivers. Instead of following him, it would be better for them to stay in the heavenly Yin-Yang sect and cultivate properly. One must know that the heavenly Yin-Yang sect had many cultivation mystic realms that were extremely helpful to everyone. How could they waste such an opportunity? Xiaochen didn't agree to the four girls going with him. Seeing this, the four girls knew that they couldn't persuade Xiaochen. Xiaochen might go along with them on small matters, but when it came to these matters, it was difficult to change Xiaochen's mind once he had made up his mind. They were a little disappointed, but there was nothing they could do. Moreover, Xiaochen had promised that he would return as soon as possible. It wasn't far from the heavenly Yin-Yang sect to the land of 100 rivers through the transmission array. It would only take 1 or 2 days. Including the time spent searching for the heavenly sunflower, Xiaochen estimated that half a month should be enough for a round trip. After greeting Qin Shuru and the other girls, as well as the rest of the Holy Palace disciples, Long Yang, Feng Ju, Long Kuei, and Long Qi had already left the heavenly Yin-Yang sect a few days ago to travel elsewhere. Xiaochen naturally couldn't find them. It was the first time Long Kuei and Long Qi had left the Dragon Clan, so they were naturally very curious about the human territory. Long Yang and Feng Ju had no choice but to bring the two sisters around the heavenly Yin-Yang sect. After greeting everyone and explaining the matter, early the next morning, Xiaochen left the heavenly Yin-Yang sect alone and rushed to the land of 100 rivers through the transmission array. There was no transmission array in the heavenly Yin-Yang sect that led directly to the land of 100 rivers. The closest transmission array to the land of 100 rivers was located in a sect called the Tianyun clan. This clan was built on the periphery of the land of 100 rivers, which was only half a day's journey away. Of course, the Tianyun clan was also a subsidiary clan of the heavenly Yin-Yang sect. He directly went to the Tianyun clan through the transmission array, and when Xiaochen appeared in the Tianyun clan, he was surprised to see that a total of 15 senior members of the Tianyun clan, led by the clan master, had already been waiting for him there. Clearly, the clan master of the Tianyun clan knew that Xiaochen was coming and had come to greet him in person. Seeing Xiaochen walk out of the transmission array, the clan master of the Tianyun clan took the initiative to greet him and said with a smile, "Saint Xiaochen, it's an honor to have you here. I'm the clan master of the Tianyun clan, Zhou Yunjing." The Tianyun clan was just a saint-level clan, and there were only less than 10 saints in the clan, including Zhou Yunjing. In the human territory of the Central World, it was not considered a powerful clan. Over the years, it had also relied on the heavenly yin-yang sect to survive in the cracks. Therefore, although he was the leader of a clan, Zhou Yunjing behaved very humbly in front of Xiaochen. This was normal. After all, the status of the clan master of a saint-level clan was naturally incomparable to that of Xiaochen, who was the successor of the saint ranking. The difference between the two was too great. In the face of Zhou Yunjing's enthusiasm, Xiaochen also smiled kindly and said, "Clan master, you're being too polite. Xiaochen is just passing by your clan this time, but there's something I'd like to ask for your help with." Hearing this, Zhou Yunjing nodded without hesitation and said, "Please speak, successor." The Tianyun clan will not hesitate to go through fire and water. If a saint-level clan like the Tianyun clan could be related to Xiaochen, it would definitely be a great thing, so Zhou Yunjing had no reason to refuse. Seeing this, Xiaochen smiled slightly and said, "Clan master, you're being too serious. I just want to know some things about the Land of 100 Rivers from you." The Tianyun clan was built on the periphery of the Land of 100 Rivers, and it was inevitable that they would meet with the major clans in the Land of 100 Rivers on a daily basis. Hence, they should have some understanding of the Land of 100 Rivers. Hence, Xiaochen also wanted to inquire about the situation in the Land of 100 Rivers. Hearing this, Zhou Yunjing naturally wouldn't refuse and immediately invited Xiaochen to the main hall. At the same time that Xiaochen arrived at the Tianyun clan, a man in black stood in front of Bai Mushuang in the Bai family mansion. It was not difficult to tell from the aura of this person that he was a saint of the present age. Standing in front of Bai Mushuang with a calm expression, he said in a low voice, "Clan master, Xiaochen has arrived at the Tianyun clan. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations." Chapter 1347. Xiaochen's every move was naturally under the control of the Bai family, so when Xiaochen had just arrived at the Tianyun clan through the teleportation array, the Bai family had already known about it. Hearing this, a strong murderous intent flashed in Bai Mushuang's eyes, and then he asked in an equally deep voice, "Are our people ready?" "Master, we have already arrived at the Land of 100 Rivers." "As long as Xiaochen enters the Land of 100 Rivers, he definitely won't be able to come out," the Bai family powerhouse replied. 7 saints, 100 half-saints, and Dao emperors were the forces that the Bai family had sent out to kill Xiaochen. It could be said to be a luxurious lineup. Of course, the result of these people's actions this time was already destined to be death. Of course, even though they knew that they would die, they still chose to take action. The Bai family had naturally paid a lot in this, especially to the 7 saints. Bai Mushuang had personally promised that their descendants would become direct disciples of the Bai family and enjoy the treatment of direct disciples in front of everyone. The net had already been set, and all that was left was to wait for Xiaochen to jump in. Just as the Bai family was ready, Xiaochen only stayed in the Tianyun clan for a day, and the next day, he left and rushed to the Land of 100 Rivers. Originally, Zhou Yunjing wanted to accompany Xiaochen, but he was rejected by Xiaochen. The reason was simple: Zhou Yunjing's cultivation was only in the saint realm, and following Xiaochen would not be of much use. Moreover, the mission this time was only to find the sky sunflower, and it would not be a hindrance if there were more people. Xiaochen also learned a lot about the Land of 100 Rivers from Zhou Yunjing. The Land of 100 Rivers was called that because it was rumored that there were hundreds of gangs here, and these gangs were all formed by the people who had wandered there. In the human territory, the major forces were not interested in the Land of 100 Rivers. The most fundamental reason was that the spirit chi in the Land of 100 Rivers was too thin. Due to geographical reasons, the Land of 100 Rivers was extremely unsuitable for people to live and cultivate in. Naturally, no force would care about such a wasteland. Therefore, as time passed, the land of 100 Rivers became a place abandoned by the world. Unless there was no way to survive in the outside world, no one would be willing to enter the land of 100 Rivers. To put it bluntly, those who lived in the land of 100 Rivers were simply waiting for death. They wouldn't be able to achieve anything great in this lifetime. Of course, they didn't have any great ambitions in their hearts, so they chose to live in the land of 100 Rivers. They were all people who had committed serious crimes or offended people they couldn't afford to offend. Generally speaking, they couldn't survive in the outside world, so they came to the land of 100 Rivers. What a pitiful and sad group of people. However, in the land of 100 Rivers, although the spiritual energy was thin, there were many unique spiritual grasses and spiritual fruits. The sky sunflower that Xiaochen was looking for this time was one of them. According to Xiaochen's idea, this trip to the land of 100 Rivers should be low-key. After finding the sky sunflower, he should leave. It seemed like a very simple task, but who would have thought that the whole thing was actually a trap set up to kill Xiaochen? With Xiaochen's speed, he flew all the way. In less than half a day, he had already arrived at the entrance of the land of 100 Rivers. From afar, the land of 100 Rivers was extremely huge. Hundreds of mountain ranges came from all directions and converged here. Therefore, it was called the land of 100 Rivers, which meant that all rivers converged here. The convergence of hundreds of mountain ranges also caused the terrain here to be extremely complicated. Because of the countless mountain ranges surrounding it, there was only one entrance to enter and exit the land of 100 Rivers. According to the map that Zhou Yunjin gave him, Xiaochen directly arrived at the entrance of the land of 100 Rivers. It was a valley that was only about 10 meters wide. This was the only entrance to the land of 100 Rivers, and on both sides were towering cliffs that reached into the clouds. There was another special thing about the land of 100 Rivers, and that was that it was impossible to fly. This was not because of the flight restriction formation, but because the land of 100 Rivers was special to begin with. As a result, once someone entered the land of 100 Rivers, no matter their cultivation, even the great sage, would lose the ability to fly. It could be said that the land of 100 Rivers was more like a huge cage. It gathered those who could not survive in the outside world and lived in this cage. Perhaps this was why the various large organizations had never thought of clearing out the land of 100 Rivers, because it was completely worthless. It was better to leave it to its own devices. After slowly landing at the entrance, Xiaochen walked towards the end of the valley. As soon as he entered the valley, Xiaochen discovered that a mysterious energy had enveloped his body. Afterwards, Xiaochen tried and discovered that he was indeed unable to fly. After walking for less than 100 meters, Xiaochen saw corpses hanging from the cliffs on both sides of the valley. Some were only bones left, while others still had flesh and blood, but they had all rotted away. The cliffs on both sides were covered with corpses, extending all the way into the depths of the valley. With just a glance, there were probably hundreds of thousands of corpses. With so many corpses hanging upside down in the air, it gave off an extremely eerie feeling. However, Xiaochen did not change his expression at all. He was no longer a young and inexperienced child. Although this scene made Xiaochen feel slightly uncomfortable, that was all. After all, Xiaochen had experienced slaughter over the years, which was no less than the corpses in front of him. As such, just these corpses alone were not enough to shock Xiaochen. There was no one in charge of guarding the entrance. Thinking about it, the land of 100 Rivers was an abandoned place. There was no value in guarding it. Just come if you want to. After about a quarter of an hour, Xiaochen passed through the valley and successfully entered the land of 100 Rivers. After passing through the valley, Xiaochen's vision suddenly became clear. What seemed to be an endless plain appeared in front of Xiaochen, but it was tightly surrounded by hundreds of towering mountains. It was really a prison. Other than this valley, it was probably really difficult for the people in the land of 100 Rivers to leave this place. It was like a sealed world, but at the same time, the spiritual energy here was extremely thin. It was even worse than the Tianqian continent in the North Star realm. Compared to the overall cultivation environment in the central world, the land of 100 rivers was indeed worthless. The spiritual energy here was at least 100 times thinner than the outside world. Think about it, in a place with such thin spiritual energy, even if one had a heaven-defying aptitude, it would be difficult to achieve anything. It was no wonder that the people of the major forces were not interested in the land of 100 rivers. If it was not necessary, they would definitely not enter. Please add, please vote, please recommend. Chapter 1348. The lack of spiritual energy caused the entire land of 100 rivers to appear extremely desolate. The ground had already dried up and cracked inch by inch. Although there were some scattered lawns, the grass was all yellow and looked like it was on the verge of death. Looking at the plains in front of him, Xiaochen knew that this was the land of 100 rivers and the sky sunflower was also located in this remote area. According to Zhou Yunjing, there were a total of 5 major cities in the land of 100 rivers. These cities were built by the major factions living in the land of 100 rivers. The best way to find the sky sunflower in the shortest time was naturally to go to the 5 major cities to inquire about it. The sky sunflower was a saint-grade spiritual herb, so it was only natural that there would not be many of them. Furthermore, the sky sunflower had a habit of only being plucked when it bloomed. It bloomed once every 5 years, and each time, the sky sunflower would only bloom for 5 days. This meant that there were only 5 days to pick the sky sunflower. If one missed it, they would have to wait for another 5 years. The people in the land of 100 rivers naturally knew about the preciousness of the sky sunflower. Therefore, every time a sky sunflower appeared, the news would quickly spread throughout the land of 100 rivers. This was the opportunity for Xiaochen to find the sky sunflower. Although he might face many competitors, it was still better than searching aimlessly by himself. Therefore, after careful consideration, Xiaochen quickly decided to listen to Zhou Yunjing's suggestion and go to the 5 major cities to see if he could find any information about the sky sunflower. Obtaining the sky sunflower in the land of 100 rivers was not an easy task. Not only was it extremely difficult to find the sky sunflower, but it was also because every time the sky sunflower appeared, there would be many people who lived in the land of 100 rivers fighting over it. Naturally, a chaotic battle was inevitable. Of course, there was also good news in the land of 100 rivers. It was certain that the strongest person in the land of 100 rivers was only at the saint realm and there were not many of them. The strongest was a saint. Thinking about it, how could a quasi-saint come to a place like the land of 100 rivers? Moreover, even the saints who lived in the land of 100 rivers had no choice but to enter the land of 100 rivers because they were unable to continue living in the outside world. Otherwise, they wouldn't be willing to live in such a damnable place and be unable to advance in their entire lives. Xiaochen wasn't too afraid of sage experts with his current cultivation. Xiaochen was confident that he could kill an ordinary sage expert in a one-on-one fight. However, his cultivation was limited to those below the sage great perfection realm. Xiaochen wouldn't be a match for a sage expert above the sage great perfection realm. However, even if he couldn't counterattack, fleeing wasn't a problem at all. It was even to the extent that even if 2 or 3 saints besieged him, Xiaochen would definitely have a very good chance of escaping if he wanted to. This was the only good news for Xiaochen. At the very least, so long as he kept a low profile in the land of 100 rivers and didn't offend too many people, then there shouldn't be any problems in terms of safety. Of course, such a situation was limited to normal circumstances. Moreover, the development of the matter this time was clearly impossible for it to develop according to Xiaochen's expectations. After all, this was a trap set up by the Bai clan. The 7 saints of the Bai clan, 100 half-saints, and Dao Emperor realm experts of the Bai clan had arrived at the land of 100 rivers before Xiaochen, and they'd done so for the sake of encircling and killing Xiaochen. Just as Xiaochen arrived at the land of 100 rivers and was about to look for a city to enter, in one of the 5 major cities, a city called Feng City. Tribute City was controlled by a gang called the Heaven Tribute Gang. Even though there were many other gangs in the city, the Heaven Tribute Gang was absolutely worthy of being called the overlord of Tribute City. Because the Heaven Tribute Gang had saints, and it wasn't just a single one. There were 3 of them. The Heaven Tribute Gang's strength was absolutely ranked in the top 5 throughout the land of 100 Rivers. At this moment, the 3 saints of the Heaven Tribute Gang and the 7 saints of the Bai clan were gathered in the front hall of the Heaven Tribute Gang's headquarters in Tribute City. Yes, as soon as the Bai clan arrived at the land of 100 Rivers, they directly entered Tribute City and quickly reached an agreement with the Heaven Tribute Gang. The Heaven Tribute Gang's spies would search for Xiao Chen's whereabouts, and the Bai clan would give the Heaven Tribute Gang a huge amount of compensation. The Heaven Tribute Gang naturally had no reason to refuse such an agreement, so they'd agreed in a very straightforward manner. At this moment, the saints from both sides were gathered here, and the master of the Heaven Tribute Gang, Lin Tianfeng, smiled as he gazed at the 7 saints of the Bai clan. "Everyone, we've already found Xiao Chen's whereabouts." With the Heaven Tribute Gang's influence in the land of 100 Rivers, Xiao Chen naturally caught their attention as soon as he entered the land of 100 Rivers. At the same time, the news had been sent back as soon as possible. Upon hearing Lin Tianfeng's words, the leader of the Bai clan saints asked in a deep voice, "Where is he?" The 7 of them had come prepared to die. If they killed Xiao Chen, they would die without a doubt, so they were already mentally prepared. Therefore, after hearing about Xiao Chen's whereabouts, the 7 saints of the Bai clan asked anxiously. As long as they killed Xiao Chen, their descendants would become direct disciples of the Bai clan and enjoy the treatment of direct disciples. This was what they valued the most. However, in the face of the Bai clan's anxiety, Lin Tianfeng said unhurriedly, Of course we have people following him. But we've already agreed." Lin Tianfeng didn't immediately reveal Xiao Chen's whereabouts to the Bai clan. He rubbed his hands together and it was apparent that he was asking for money from the Bai clan. The cooperation between the 2 sides was based on benefits. How could an old fox like Lin Tianfeng reveal the slightest clue before he obtained any benefits? This was the usual method of an old fox like Lin Tianfeng, who would not act until he saw the hare. Upon seeing Lin Tianfeng's reaction, the 7 saints of the Bai clan naturally knew what he meant. Immediately, the leader tossed a space ring to Lin Tianfeng and said in an ice-cold voice, "You can speak now, right?" Lin Tianfeng ignored the attitude of the Bai family saint. After receiving the space ring, he first checked the contents of the space ring. After confirming that the Bai family hadn't embezzled anything, Lin Tianfeng said with a smile again, "Of course. Xiao Chen has just entered the land of 100 Rivers and is rushing toward Ming City. My men are still following him. When do you intend to take action? I'll get someone to lead you there." "Let's set off now," the leader of the Bai clan said. "Okay." Seeing this, Lin Tianfeng simply nodded in response. Then, he ordered a member of the Celestial Tribute faction to lead the Bai family to intercept and kill Xiao Chen. Xiao Chen didn't know that the Bai clan would make a move so suddenly. However, he had already discovered that he was being followed. After all, the Celestial Association's member was only a half-step saint and he couldn't hide his cultivation level from Xiao Chen for long. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1349. The Celestial Tribute Association looked down on him too much. They had only sent a half-saint to follow him. How could a half-saint not be exposed when he was around Xiao Chen? Therefore, Xiao Chen quickly discovered the half-saint. Of course, it would be wrong to say that the Celestial Tribute Association looked down on him. It wasn't that they didn't want to send a saint to follow Xiao Chen, but they had no choice. There were very few saints in the land of 100 Rivers. As one of the strongest factions in the land of 100 Rivers, the Celestial Tribute Association only had 3 saints. As a result, how could they send a saint to follow Xiao Chen? Therefore, sending a half-saint to follow Xiao Chen was already the limit of the Celestial Tribute Association. Moreover, it wasn't the Celestial Tribute Association that wanted to kill Xiao Chen, but the Bai family. Naturally, they couldn't send a saint. Xiao Chen calmly continued towards Ming City. This was Zhou Yunjing's suggestion to Xiao Chen. Because the leader of the Mingjin gang, which was in charge of Ming City, was related to Zhou Yunjing, Xiaochen could ask the leader of the Mingjing gang for information about the Heaven Sunflower if he went to Ming City. Nothing out of the ordinary happened along the way. When Xiaochen arrived at a stone forest, a cold smile appeared on Xiaochen's face. His figure quickly disappeared into the stone forest. Although it was called a stone forest, it was actually formed by numerous boulders gathered together. However, there were so many of them that it seemed like a dense forest of boulders. As Xiaochen walked through the stone forest, a black-clothed middle-aged man appeared outside the stone forest a short while after he entered. The middle-aged man frowned slightly as he looked at the stone forest in front of him. Then, he followed Xiaochen into the stone forest. He was surrounded by boulders that were dozens of meters tall. The man in black completely lost track of Xiaochen. He couldn't even sense his aura. He anxiously searched for Xiaochen, but to no avail. Anger flashed in the man's eyes. Damn it, where did that brat go? Just as the black-clothed man was at a loss, an indifferent voice suddenly sounded from behind him. Are you looking for me? The sudden voice startled the man. He turned around abruptly, and at the same time, his body involuntarily retreated. After putting some distance between him and Xiaochen, the black-robed man could not help but exclaim in shock. Xiaochen, the man who suddenly appeared behind him was naturally Xiaochen. Upon hearing that the man actually called out his name, Xiaochen's eyes glinted. He initially thought that the man was only following him to kill and rob him. After all, it was common to kill and rob in the land of 100 rivers. But now, it seemed that things weren't that simple. If it was just killing and robbing, then how did this man know his name? This was Xiaochen's first time in the land of 100 rivers. He didn't know anyone here. With doubts in his mind, Xiaochen's gaze gradually turned cold. He approached the man in black and asked, "Who are you? How do you know my name?" The man in black had no intention of answering Xiaochen's question. He just gritted his teeth and thought of a countermeasure. He knew that Xiaochen was a chosen on the holy rankings. Therefore, even though he was a half-saint expert, he still had no intention of fighting with Xiaochen. What a joke! Even a saint expert wouldn't be able to win against a chosen on the holy rankings, let alone a half-saint expert. It wasn't until this moment that the man in black realized that Xiaochen had already discovered him. It was just that Xiaochen hadn't said anything. Xiaochen had entered the stone forest just to lure him out. Fine beads of sweat appeared on his forehead as he continued to retreat. Looking at the change in the man's expression, Xiaochen was even more certain of his guess. There was definitely something wrong with the man in black. You don't want to say? Very well, then let me see how tough your bones are. Everything was strange. Xiaochen didn't hesitate any longer. As soon as he finished speaking, he chose to attack. The sword domain instantly broke out of his body and enveloped the man in black. Being enveloped by the sword domain, the man in black's strength was instantly suppressed by almost 40%. At the same time, the sharp sword chi within the sword domain roared and attacked the man in black from all directions. His cultivation was half a realm higher than Xiaochen's, but so what? A half-saint expert was nothing in front of Xiaochen. Xiaochen moved and pointed his finger. He instantly used the fish intestine sword finger and pierced through the man's abdomen. It did not take Xiaochen long to subdue the middle-aged man and cripple his cultivation within a quarter of an hour. Xiaochen then stepped on the man's chest and asked again, "What about you? Speak. Who are you? Why are you following me?" He asked the man in black again. However, the man in black still kept his mouth shut. Seeing this, Xiaochen didn't waste any more time. With a thought, the dustless sword instantly appeared in his hand. With a flick of his hand, the man in black's leg tendons were severed. First it was his left foot, then his right foot, and then his hands. The man in black couldn't help but cry out in pain. In the end, he spoke weakly. I'll say. I'm from the Celestial Sect. The sect leader made a deal with some people 2 days ago. He wanted me to keep an eye on your whereabouts, so I've been waiting for you at the entrance. When I saw you today, I sent the news back. Since then, I've been following you." The man in black didn't dare to hold back and spoke truthfully. Hearing this, Xiaochen frowned slightly. "Who made a deal with your sect leader?" "This. I don't know." "The sect leader didn't tell me," said the man in black. The man in black only knew to keep an eye on Xiaochen's whereabouts, but he didn't know the identity of these people. Lin Tianfeng had never mentioned these things, so the man in black was only following orders. Seeing that the man in black really didn't know the identity of the other party, Xiaochen didn't continue to ask. However, he was already a little wary. It seemed that this trip to the 100 Rivers lands wasn't so simple. Thinking of this, Xiaochen didn't hesitate any longer. He directly ended the man's life with a single slash of his sword. Then, he left the stone forest and hurried towards Ming City. Less than 10 minutes after Xiaochen left, 7 saints from the Bai clan and a half-step saint from the Celestial sect arrived at the stone forest. They found the man in black's corpse here. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1350. The black-clothed man who was in charge of following Xiaochen had been killed, and the 7 saints of the Bai clan had slightly unsightly expressions on their faces. The saint in the lead even spoke coldly, "Looks like we've been discovered. Where's the path to Ming City? Let's catch up as soon as possible." Since they'd been discovered, then there was no need to continue acting sneakily. Moreover, Xiaochen was definitely on the way to Ming City, so they had to stop him before he entered the city. They knew that Ming City wasn't within the territory of the Heaven Worship Gang, so it would be quite difficult to deal with once Xiaochen entered Ming City. After all, the various gangs in the 100 Creeks region wouldn't obey the Bai clan's orders. Moreover, Ming City was under the control of the Mingjin Gang, so even the Heaven Worship Gang wouldn't be able to do anything to it. So, the best opportunity to kill Xiaochen was to kill him before he entered Ming City. When he heard the saint from the Bai clan, the half-saint from the Heaven Worship Gang who'd come along naturally told the 7 of them the path to Ming City. The leader of the Bai clan spoke when he heard that. "Stay here and lead the others over. The 7 of us will go ahead and stop Xiaochen." The 7 of them were at the saint realm, so they were much faster than half-saints and Dao emperors. So, they didn't have any time to waste. So, the 7 saints of the Bai clan intended to go ahead first. As for the other 100 half-saints and Dao emperors of the Bai clan, they would follow closely behind them. Something worth mentioning was that the group the Bai clan had dispatched to kill Xiaochen had concealed their identities a long time ago, and the Bai clan had destroyed all connections between them and the Bai clan. It could be said that the identities of these 107 saints of the Bai clan had ceased to exist since the moment they stepped foot into the 100 Creeks region. They'd done this so that the Heavenly Yin sect and Yang sect would investigate the Bai clan. With that, the 7 saints of the Bai clan disappeared from where they were and sped towards Ming City. The half-saint from the Celestial Worship faction led the other 100 Bai clan experts as well. Until now, Xiaochen still did not know that the Bai family wanted to kill him. However, after the incident with the black-clothed man, Xiaochen realized that something was wrong. It seemed that this mission was not as simple as it seemed. Xiaochen could vaguely sense a hint of a conspiracy. Just as the 7 saints of the Bai family had thought, Xiaochen was indeed hurrying towards Ming City. Xiaochen had been very careful along the way, but after killing the man in black, Xiaochen discovered that no one was following him. It seemed like they had only sent one person to follow him. Just as Xiaochen was about to reach Ming City and was about to pass through a dense forest, he suddenly sensed 7 terrifying auras coming at him at high speed, continuously attacking him. Xiaochen's expression changed slightly when he sensed the 7 presences. He murmured softly, "Saints, the 7 presences definitely came from saints." 7 saints were traveling together, and from the looks of it, they were heading straight for him. Xiaochen's guess was correct. In just a few seconds after the 7 presences appeared, 7 figures appeared in front of Xiaochen and blocked his path. The 7 of them all wore loose black robes. When they saw Xiaochen, killing intent erupted from their eyes without holding back at all. Xiaochen didn't need to say anything. He instantly understood that the seven saints' target was him. Moreover, they wanted to kill him. They knew that he was a chosen on the saint rankings, but they still dared to attack him. Xiaochen was sure that the seven saints were probably death servants. They were already prepared to die. The seven of them were naturally the seven saints from the Bai clan. However, Xiaochen clearly didn't know their identities, and they didn't give Xiaochen any chance. The leader of the seven shouted coldly, "Die!" As soon as he finished speaking, the seven saints launched an attack at the same time, surrounding Xiaochen and trying to kill him. The seven saints attacked at the same time, and the terrifying pressure instantly engulfed the entire sky. They actually sent out seven saints just to kill him. How generous! Obviously, it was impossible for him to be a match for seven saints. Xiaochen wasn't afraid at all if he only faced one saint. Even if he faced 2 or 3 saints, Xiaochen could still retreat calmly. However, his life was hanging by a thread when facing 7 saints at the same time. However, Xiaochen didn't intend to give up without a fight. In the face of the 7 saints' attacks, Xiaochen instantly activated the law of gravity. At the same time, he moved his feet and quickly dodged the 7 saints' attacks. There was a difference of an entire realm in cultivation. As a result, although the law of gravity could suppress the power of the 7 saints, the effect was extremely limited. The suppression of the law of gravity was directly related to one's cultivation. With Xiaochen's current cultivation, the law of gravity could only suppress saints below the perfection saint stage at most. Fortunately, the 7 saints' cultivation was below the perfection saint stage, and the strongest was only at the greater saint stage. Even so, Xiaochen didn't have any chance of winning. Therefore, after dodging the first round of attacks from the 7 saints, Xiaochen's first choice was to turn around and retreat. He headed straight for the dense forest. There was definitely no way to escape in an open area. However, they were in a dense forest now, which gave Xiaochen a space to hide. Seeing that Xiaochen was about to rush into the dense forest, the leading saint from the Bai family immediately said coldly, "Stop him, don't let him escape." Before setting off, Bai Mushuang had repeatedly instructed that they absolutely couldn't give Xiaochen any chance to escape. They had to kill him as quickly as possible. Therefore, the 7 saints from the Bai family didn't have the slightest bit of carelessness when facing Xiaochen. They all wanted to kill Xiaochen as soon as possible. As the leader yelled, the other 6 saints attacked at the same time. One after another, they attacked Xiaochen with all sorts of martial arts techniques. Those were the attacks of saints, and every attack was definitely not weak. If Xiaochen took one of those attacks head-on, he would definitely be seriously injured. He rushed into the dense forest without stopping while dodging the attacks of the 6 saints behind him. His feet constantly moved, and his body moved left and right. After dodging 6 attacks in a row, the dense forest was right in front of him. As long as he rushed in, Xiaochen would have a chance to deal with the 7 saints. However, when he was just a step away, the leading saint from the Bai family pointed his finger. Then, a white light flashed by at lightning speed. This time, Xiaochen couldn't dodge it. The white light directly penetrated Xiaochen's chest, and a mouthful of blood immediately spurted out from Xiaochen's mouth. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1351. Xiaochen was eventually gravely injured by the continuous attacks of the 7 saints. However, Xiaochen didn't stop after being hit. Instead, he used the force of the attack to dash into the dense forest. He knew clearly that he would die if he stopped. Xiaochen, who had been on the verge of death countless times, knew his current situation very well. Seeing that Xiaochen didn't stop at all after being hit by his finger, the leader of the Bai family didn't hesitate at all. He moved his feet and chased after Xiaochen into the dense forest. In just a few seconds, the leader of the Bai family arrived at the dense forest. Apart from a pool of blood on the ground, there was no sign of Xiaochen. The leader of the Bai family knitted his brows and said coldly, "That's impossible. Such serious injuries, the leader of the Bai family thought that Xiaochen was definitely seriously injured after being hit by his finger. How did he manage to escape? He obviously didn't know that Xiaochen possessed the tempered battle body. After being hit, Xiaochen activated the tempered battle body and the injury on his chest healed almost instantly. However, Xiaochen consumed a lot of energy in doing so. Therefore, after dashing into the dense forest, Xiaochen didn't dare to stop at all. Finally, he managed to dash into the dense forest and wasn't killed instantly. At this moment, Xiaochen finally came to a stop after sprinting for hundreds of kilometers. His face was pale and his forehead was covered in sweat. Xiaochen had indeed consumed a lot of energy after forcefully recovering from his injuries and sprinting for such a long distance. He calmed his somewhat rapid breathing. That was really thrilling, and he might have died on the spot if he wasn't careful. 7 saints besieging me. What a big move. After the previous encirclement, Xiaochen was certain that this mission was definitely a trap. It was a trap to kill him, and the person who set this trap wanted to kill him directly in the land of 100 rivers. Furthermore, judging from the viciousness of the 7 saints, it was obvious that they did not intend to give him any chance of survival. Unfortunately, even though he'd confirmed that someone had set a trap to kill him, Xiaochen was still unable to figure out who the person behind the scenes was. After all, those 7 saints from before hadn't revealed their identities. Xiaochen leaned weakly against the tree. 7 saints. This was already beyond the limits of what he could deal with. Moreover, based on the current situation, the mastermind would definitely not rest until he killed Xiaochen. As a result, Xiaochen was afraid that he wouldn't even be able to leave the land of 100 rivers. The exit must have been blocked. It seemed that he could only send a message back to ask for reinforcements. Thinking of this, Xiaochen did not hesitate. He immediately took out a voice transmission talisman from the storage ring and prepared to send the matter here to the Sky Yin Yang sect. However, just as Xiaochen was about to send a voice transmission, the voice transmission talisman spontaneously combusted. The voice transmission talisman didn't work. Seeing this, Xiaochen frowned and muttered softly with an ugly expression. Damn it, the sealing talisman formation, the voice transmission talisman couldn't be used. In this case, the 7 saints must have set up a sealing talisman formation around him. The sealing talisman formation only had one function, and that was to seal off an area and directly cut off all connections between the area and the outside world. Once the sealing talisman formation was set up, all the voice transmission talismans in the area would lose their function and would not be able to send messages out at all. It wasn't a high-level talisman formation, but it was very practical. He had forgotten that these fellows could also set up sealing array glyphs. However, from this point, the person behind the scenes was also quite well prepared. It seemed that this operation had been carefully planned. Now that the voice transmission talisman was useless, he let out a sigh of relief. Being enveloped by the sealing talisman formation, if he continued to stay in this dense forest, he would undoubtedly be waiting for death. In the end, he would only be a turtle in a jar. The only way to break out now was to find a way to break out of the encirclement and break out of the range of the sealing talisman formation. Then, he could use the voice transmission talisman to contact the Sky Yin Yang sect. As long as he could hold on until the experts of the Sky Yin Yang sect arrived, the crisis would naturally be resolved. According to Xiaochen's idea, the sealing talisman formation would not be too large. At most, it would cover this dense forest. In other words, as long as he could successfully break out of this dense forest, he would be able to ask for help from the Sky Yin Yang sect. However, it was easier said than done. It was impossible to succeed. There were 7 saints, and who knew if there were others? Just as Xiaochen was thinking of a countermeasure, the 7 saints of the Bai family had indeed set up sealing talisman formations around the dense forest. Their goal was naturally to prevent Xiaochen from contacting the Sky Yin Yang sect. After all, the ambush had been exposed. As long as Xiaochen was not stupid, he would definitely ask for help from the Sky Yin Yang sect. The Bai family would definitely not give Xiaochen the chance to do so. The sealing talisman formation had been successfully set up. As such, the next step was to find a way to find Xiao Chen and kill him. The battle had dragged on for so long, and the other 100 experts of the Bai family had arrived by now. At this moment, the leading expert of the Bai family said, "Xiao Chen is hiding in this forest. The 7 of us will be in charge of locking down the entire forest. All of you enter the forest and search for Xiao Chen. Once you find him, there's no need to fight him. Send the signal as soon as possible, and we'll rush over immediately." He ordered the 100 half-saints and Dao emperors of the Bai family to enter the forest and search for Xiao Chen. As for the 7 saints, they would remain outside the forest and be in charge of locking down the forest to prevent Xiao Chen from breaking out. The voice-transmitting talisman was useless because of the sealing charm matrix. However, ordinary communication tools such as signal flares could still be used. Therefore, after entering the forest, they sent out a signal as soon as they found Xiao Chen. The 100 experts of the Bai family immediately nodded when they heard the leading saint. After that, they split into 20 groups of 5 and entered the forest. As for the 7 saints, they stood guard outside the forest and were on guard against Xiao Chen at all times. The Bai family wanted to surround Xiao Chen and kill him on the spot. At this moment, Xiao Chen had found a secluded place and was hoping to make the best use of his time to recover his spirit energy. The current situation was very bad indeed. However, no matter what, his strength was the most fundamental form of protection. So, Xiao Chen wanted to recover as soon as possible. Only then would he be able to deal with the various situations and dangers that might arise. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1352. He knew that someone would enter this forest to search for him sooner or later, so Xiao Chen didn't dare waste any time. By relying on the assistance of medicinal pills and the formidable strength of his tempered combat body, Xiao Chen had almost recovered in merely an hour. Even though he couldn't be considered to have recovered to his peak state, he couldn't be bothered about all of that now. Xiao Chen stood up and spat out a mouthful of foul air while a wisp of icy coldness flashed through his eyes. He'd already made the decision to break out of the encirclement. Breaking out of the encirclement was his only choice. He would die sooner or later if he stayed in this forest, so he might as well risk it all. Right when Xiao Chen was thinking like this, 5 faint auras arrived intermittently from his left. These 5 auras were very weak, and he couldn't sense them clearly. Obviously, someone was intentionally suppressing their auras with all their might. It was Xiao Chen's senses that were extremely sharp that allowed him to capture these auras. When he sensed these 5 auras, Xiao Chen's figure flashed, and he silently hid behind a pile of weeds at the side. In terms of ability to conceal his aura, Xiao Chen didn't dare say that he was at the top, but he absolutely surpassed 99% of the cultivators. If Xiao Chen intentionally concealed his aura, then ordinary cultivators would be utterly unable to notice him at all. Xiao Chen waited patiently for the arrival of these 5 people. Not long after, about the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the 5 figures finally appeared in front of him. Just like the 7 saints from before, these 5 people wore black robes as well. However, their cultivations weren't very high. The person in the lead was a half-saint while the other 4 were at the Dao Emperor realm. Such a small group of 5 was naturally not dangerous to Xiao Chen, but Xiao Chen didn't act rashly. After all, who knew if there were any other groups in the surroundings? It wouldn't be good to act rashly and alert them. Xiao Chen waited patiently for the 5 of them to ceaselessly approach him, and he only chose to make a move when they were less than 10 meters away from him. It wasn't an arena battle now, so he couldn't hold back at all. So, Xiao Chen went all out as soon as he attacked. The sword domain and laws of gravity erupted at the same time, and these 2 forces instantly enveloped the 5 of them. The dual suppression of the laws of gravity and the sword domain caused their expressions to turn grim at the first possible moment. The sudden appearance of the sword domain and laws of gravity instantly suppressed almost half of their strength. Their expressions immediately changed when they faced such a sudden and unexpected event, and the half-saint in the lead even shouted at the first possible moment. "Release the signal." However, it was still too late. Right when this half-saint had just spoken and hadn't even finished speaking, Xiao Chen's figure had leaped out from the grass at the side. He held the dustless sword tightly in his hand as he casually slashed out with 4 strands of 9 sifting sword qi that shot directly towards the 4 Dao Emperor Realm cultivators. At the same time, he pointed forward with his left hand, and the fishbowl sword finger was instantly executed and shot directly towards the half-saint in the lead. At practically the exact same moment, Xiao Chen executed a martial Dao attack. 4 strands of 9 sip sword qi and a fish intestine sword finger. 5 attacks were launched at the same time, and they instantly struck the 5 of them. They didn't even have the time to let out shrill cries before this group of 5 was directly annihilated by Xiao Chen. It wasn't difficult for Xiao Chen to kill ordinary Dao Emperor Realm cultivators right now, and it was even to the extent that even half-saints wouldn't be able to resist Xiao Chen. Moreover, Xiao Chen had launched a surprise attack just now. At the same time, he was suppressed by the laws of gravity and the sword domain. So, it was naturally impossible for them to be a match for Xiao Chen when they weren't on guard. After he killed the 5 of them in one go, Xiao Chen directly arrived before them. After he searched their bodies, he noticed that they didn't have any personal belongings at all. Every single one of them only had a signal flare. Besides that, they didn't have anything else, and they didn't even have a spatial ring. They really are damned servants. They didn't even bring a spatial ring. Looks like they really are unafraid of death. These people were clearly aware that they wouldn't be able to return this time. Regardless of whether they were able to successfully kill Xiao Chen in the end, they would definitely die. So, they didn't even bring a spatial ring with them. He couldn't find anything that could prove their identities, nor did he have the slightest evidence. Even though Xiao Chen was slightly disappointed by this, he didn't stay and immediately left. He obtained 5 signal flares from the 5 of them. They might be useful, so Xiao Chen took them with him. Xiao Chen continued to move through the dense forest. All along the way, Xiao Chen was extremely cautious. A few hours passed, and the sky was gradually darkening. During this period of time, Xiao Chen killed another group of 5. Similarly, besides the signal flares, these 5 people had nothing else on them. There was no way to prove the identities of these people, so it was difficult to determine who the person behind the scenes was. The person behind the scenes hid very well and didn't leave behind any clues. Of course, this was probably also because of the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect. After all, if the Heavenly Yin-Yang sect found out, the person behind the scenes would definitely not have a good ending. Since he couldn't find any clues, Xiao Chen simply couldn't be bothered to think about it anymore. The most important thing now was to think of a way to save his life. If he lost his life, then wouldn't everything else be meaningless? Xiao Chen walked all the way from the depths of the dense forest to the periphery. Along the way, he had been deliberately avoiding the groups of black-clothed cultivators. These people were all here to search for him. Xiao Chen finally arrived at the edge of the dense forest. However, after secretly observing for a while, Xiao Chen discovered that the 7 saints from before hadn't entered the dense forest. Instead, they were standing guard outside the dense forest. As a result, no matter where he tried to break out of the encirclement, he would definitely be discovered by the 7 of them. At that time, the 7 of them would definitely surround him and kill him immediately. If he was surrounded and killed this time, he probably wouldn't be as lucky as last time. After all, the threat of 7 saints was no joke. Xiao Chen pondered for a while as he hid in the shadows. In the end, he was unable to come up with a surefire plan. In the end, Xiao Chen gritted his teeth and made a decision. Whatever, I can only risk it. With that, Xiao Chen withdrew a signal flare from his spatial ring. If he wanted to break out of the encirclement, the best method Xiao Chen could think of now was to draw the 7 saints away. The method was very simple, and it was naturally to use these signal flares. Every single one of the 2 groups of black-clothed cultivators that he'd killed earlier had a signal flare on them. As a result, there was no need to explain the use of the signal flare. They were definitely used to report to him after discovering him. With the sealing charm array in place, the voice-transmitting talisman was no longer of any use in this dense forest. The only way to communicate with each other was through ordinary signal flares. Therefore, Xiaochen planned to use this method to lure away the 7 saints who had been guarding outside. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1353. It was indeed very bold to use the signal flare to lure the 7 saints away, but it was the only way Xiaochen could think of at the moment. Xiaochen did not know if he would succeed or not. Even he himself was not confident about it. While the Bai clan was trying to kill Xiaochen in the forest, 4 middle-aged men were sitting together in a huge mansion in Ming City, not far away from where he was. This mansion was where the Mingjin gang, which controlled Ming City, was located. Like the Fengtian gang, the Mingjin gang was one of the strongest gangs in the land of 100 Rivers. It was even stronger than the Fengtian gang because there were 4 saints in the Mingjin gang. Among them, the leader of the Mingjin gang was in the Saint Realm Great Mastery. In the entire land of 100 Rivers, the leader of the Mingjin gang could be ranked in the top 3. The middle-aged men sitting in the room were none other than the 4 saints of the Mingjin gang. Among them, the middle-aged man sitting at the head of the table had a full beard. He looked rough and his skin was dark and rough. At first glance, he looked like a farmer in the prime of his life. However, no one in the entire North River dared to underestimate this man who looked like a strong farmer. This was because he was the leader of the Mingjin gang, Jingping. It was a very ordinary name and a very ordinary appearance. Of course, it was the same as Jingping's life experience. If it wasn't for that incident, Jingping's life would have been very simple. In fact, Jingping was born very ordinary and his cultivation talent was not high. It was only because of a great opportunity that he obtained the inheritance of an ancient almighty that he was able to break through the saint realm and become a saint. Before entering the land of 100 Rivers, Jingping had assumed that he was a loose cultivator. However, he ended up getting married and having a child. His family lived in a small city. Relying on his cultivation base, Jingping was able to live a comfortable life and was highly respected in the city. However, everything changed because of the arrival of this young master. This young master fancied Jingping's wife. Not only did he force himself on her, he even killed her with his own hands in the end. As the saying goes, how could one not take revenge for the murder of one's wife? Jingping was naturally like this as well. Unfortunately, that young master was a member of the Xianyuan clan, so how could Jingping go against him? In the end, not only was he unable to kill his enemy, it even caused him to be utterly unable to continue living in the outside world. He could only leave this place far away and struggle on while at death's door. He thought about revenge at all times, but Jingping knew that it was impossible for him to accomplish it by himself. It was even to the extent that even leaving the Valley of Rivers was a delusion. Because once he did, then Jingping was very clearly aware that he would definitely suffer the endless pursuit of the Xianyuan clan. Before the Xianyuan clan, he, Jingping, was just an ant, and he simply couldn't be any weaker. He'd originally thought that he would just wait for death to arrive, but recently, Jingping had received news that a group of mysterious figures were pursuing a young man who'd just entered the Valley of Rivers. Originally, such incidents were extremely common in the Valley of Rivers, so it wasn't surprising at all. However, the strange thing was that the strength of this group of mysterious figures was extremely terrifying. They were led by 7 saints, and they had 100 half-saints and Tao Emperor realm experts under their command. Such a formidable force was clearly not the doing of a gang in the Valley of Rivers. Because it was impossible for any gang in the Valley of Rivers to possess such a luxurious force of 7 saints at the same time. Obviously, this was the doing of an outside power. Moreover, they didn't hesitate to utilize such a luxurious force to besiege and kill a young man. This was even more incomprehensible. So, out of curiosity, Jingping had ordered his subordinates to investigate this matter in detail. In the end, he'd found out through one of his spies in the Heaven Worship gang that the young man they were pursuing was called Xiaochen. He was really Xiaochen who'd killed Bai Churan a few days ago and ascended to the 92nd position on the saint rankings. He was the holy disciple of the heavenly Yin sect on the saint rankings. Jinping was shocked when he heard this, but it wasn't long before he fell into hesitation. There was no doubt that Xiao Chen's life was definitely hanging by a thread right now. Because even if he was a holy disciple on the saint rankings, it was absolutely impossible for him to be a match for 7 saints. If Jinping led the Mingxin gang to assist Xiao Chen right now, then so long as he was able to protect Xiao Chen's life, then wouldn't Xiao Chen owe him a huge favor? On the other hand, with Xiao Chen's identity, if Xiao Chen was willing to help Jinping, then not only would all the members of the Mingxin gang be able to leave the Valley of Rivers, Jinping would even be able to take revenge. After all, even though the Xianyuan clan was strong, the person who'd killed Jinping's wife was merely an ordinary young master of the Xianyuan clan. Moreover, his natural talent in cultivation was extremely ordinary. He couldn't be considered to be a core disciple of the Xianyuan clan, let alone a holy disciple on the saint rankings. In this way, with Xiao Chen's ability, he would absolutely be able to take revenge for Jinping if he really wanted to. For the sake of revenge and for the sake of being able to leave the Valley of Rivers, Jinping hesitated. That was why he'd gathered the other 3 saints to discuss this matter. He had already told his thoughts to the 3 people beside him, but after hearing his words, the 3 of them were still hesitant. Firstly, saving Xiao Chen was indeed a good thing, and they would definitely be able to obtain unexpected benefits. However, that was the best outcome. Once they failed, would the Mingxin gang be able to fend off the attacks of those mysterious people? After all, there were 7 true saints. If they acted against the Mingxin gang would definitely be unable to resist them. The risk was too great, and no one dared to make a rash decision. Seeing that the 3 of them had sunk into hesitation, the 4 people in the room fell into silence for a moment. The entire room was quiet, and the atmosphere became a little strange. In this strange atmosphere, after a long while, Jinping suddenly slammed the table, stood up, and said, "Let's go. Brother, they say that riches come from danger. Are we going to stay in the Valley of Rivers forever? Perhaps our Mingxin gang will be annihilated if we act this time, but what if we succeed? Won't we be able to leave this damned place then? I think we can give it a try. After all, he's a chosen on the saint rankings. He's in the limelight right now. Compared to the rewards, I think this little bit of risk is worth the gamble." Jinping finally made his decision. The other 3 saints pondered for a moment before making up their minds. "All right, we'll listen to you, big brother. But how are we going to save him? I'm afraid we can't fight head-on, right? There's no need to worry about that. I'm sure that Chosen Xiao Chen is definitely thinking of a way to contact the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect right now, so our goal isn't to defeat those mysterious people. We just need to stall for time until the experts of the heavenly Yin Taiyang sect arrive. Everything will naturally be resolved then. We just need to stall for time, a day at most. I think that with our Mingxin gang's strength, we should be able to succeed," Jinping said loudly. Begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1354. For the sake of taking revenge for his wife and for the sake of leaving the land of rivers, Jinping had made his decision. He didn't want to miss such an opportunity that was placed before him, and he was willing to take a gamble. Jinping was quite bold indeed. No wonder he was able to establish the Mingxin gang in the land of rivers. After all, his decision was very likely to cause the Mingxin gang to be annihilated. Of course, this was like a gamble. If he won, then Jinping and everyone else in the Mingxin gang would soar into the sky, but if he lost, then the outcome was obvious. It could be said that Jinping was using everything in the Mingxin gang as a gamble. However, since he'd made his decision and the other 3 saints had agreed, Jinping didn't hesitate any longer and immediately shouted in a low voice. "Inform all those who have reached the Tao Emperor realm to gather in 15 minutes. Then, we will set off to rescue Holy Son Xiao Chen." No one had imagined that the Mingxin gang would actually take action at a time like this, nor had they imagined that Jinping would actually be so insane to the point of not hesitating to use the entire Mingxin gang as a gamble. At this moment, Xiao Chen was still unaware of the Mingxin gang's actions and Jinping's decision. At this moment, he was hiding within the forest and waiting for the best opportunity. The veil of night grew deeper and deeper, and it was already past midnight. At this moment, Xiaochen seemed as if he'd completely fused into the darkness. His entire body didn't emanate even the slightest aura, and it was even to the extent that his breathing seemed to have stopped. From the beginning until the end, Xiaochen had been paying attention to the 7 saints outside the forest for over 2 hours. These 7 saints were the most threatening existences. As for the other half-saints and Tao emperors, to put it bluntly, Xiaochen was entirely capable of defeating them one by one if they weren't present. Even if he couldn't kill them, leaving would absolutely be as easy as flipping his hand. The greatest threat was still the 7 saints. However, Xiaochen was definitely unable to deal with them, so he could only send a message to the heavenly yin-yang sect. Time flowed by slowly. At this moment, Xiaochen was unable to sense any auras in the surroundings. In other words, the pairs of black-clothed cultivators who'd entered the forest to search earlier had already left this area and headed to other areas to search. The time had finally come. Without any hesitation, Xiaochen immediately pulled down the rope on the signal flare. In an instant, a signal flare soared into the sky, instantly illuminating the originally dark sky. As the signal flare rose into the sky, Xiaochen didn't dare to hesitate at all. He immediately rushed in another direction. Suddenly, a signal flare rose into the sky. The 7 saints who had been guarding the periphery of the dense forest were delighted. However, just as they were about to move, their leader said calmly, "The 5 of us will go. Old 6 and Old 7 will stay here." The leader was really cautious. Even though there was a signal flare in the sky, he still left 2 saints to guard the place. As soon as he finished speaking, without waiting for Old 6 and Old 7 to reply, the leader immediately led the other 4 saints and rushed in the direction of the signal flare. The movements of the 7 saints naturally couldn't escape Xiaochen's eyes. At this moment, they were sprinting along the predetermined route while Xiaochen observed the movements of the 7 saints. When he saw that they'd actually left 2 saints to guard the place, Xiaochen's expression turned extremely ugly. The plan didn't succeed, but there was no other way now. There was no turning back. This was the best opportunity. If he couldn't break out of the encirclement this time and send the news back to the Taiyang sect, there would be even less of a chance in the future. Without any hesitation, nothing in this world was guaranteed. Even if the situation had changed, Xiaochen could only brace himself for now. 2 saints were much better than 7 saints. At least 5 of them had been successfully lured away by him. Thinking of this, Xiaochen also rushed out of the dense forest. At the same time, the 2 saints in charge of guarding Xiaochen immediately discovered Xiaochen's tracks. One of them immediately shouted, "Damn it, we've been tricked." As they spoke, their gazes fell on Xiaochen at the same time. At this moment, Xiaochen had already rushed out of the dense forest. At most, he would be able to rush out of the range of the ceiling talisman array. At that time, he would be able to use the sound transmission talisman. The signal flare was sent by Xiaochen. The 2 saints immediately realized this. Without any time to think, they immediately rushed towards Xiaochen. However, there was a certain distance between them after all. It wasn't easy for them to catch up to Xiaochen. They watched helplessly as Xiaochen rushed out of the range of the ceiling talisman array. At this moment, the 5 saints who had been lured away earlier also rushed out of the dense forest. When the leader saw that Xiaochen had already rushed out of the range of the ceiling talisman array, he immediately shouted angrily, "Stop him. Don't let him use the sound transmission talisman." These words were directed at the 2 saints who were chasing after Xiaochen. Unfortunately, although the leader shouted angrily, it was clearly too late to stop Xiaochen now. As soon as Xiaochen rushed out of the range of the ceiling talisman array, a ray of light flashed from his storage ring. Then, a brand new sound transmission talisman appeared in Xiaochen's hand. Seeing that Xiaochen had already taken out the sound transmission talisman and that the sound transmission talisman was beginning to glow with a faint white light, it was obvious that he had already begun to transmit his sound transmission. Faced with this scene, the leader's face darkened. The veins on his forehead bulged as he cursed in his heart. Damn it, they had searched for Xiaochen for almost an entire night, but in the end, they still let Xiaochen successfully transmit his sound transmission. Was all their efforts going to be for naught? They were furious and terrified at the same time. They absolutely could not let Xiaochen succeed. Or rather, even if Xiaochen used the sound transmission talisman, they had to kill him before the experts of the Heavenly Yin Solar Sect arrived. Thinking of this, the leader sped up again. At the same time, the 4 saints behind him also sped up. For a moment, Xiaochen was running at the front in the dark night. Behind him, the 7 saints split into 2 groups and chased closely behind. It sounded like a long time, but in reality, it was only a matter of a few breaths. The white light on the sound transmission talisman grew denser and denser. In the end, the white light turned into specks of stars and disappeared. The sound transmission was finally successful. Xiaochen finally succeeded in transmitting the message back to the Heavenly Yin Solar Sect. The content was very brief, only 1 sentence. Your life is in danger. Come to the land of 100 rivers quickly. It was a simple sentence, but Xiaochen believed that Qianling would definitely understand what he meant. This sound transmission talisman was for Xiaochen to send to Qianling. Seeing that the sound transmission talisman had successfully completed the transmission, the 7 saints behind him all gritted their teeth. The leader even roared furiously. Chase, chase after him. We must kill him. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1355. Xiaochen's request for help had been successfully sent back to the Heavenly Yin Yang sect. The killing intent in the leader's heart grew even stronger when he saw this. He had to kill Xiaochen before the experts of the Heavenly Yin Yang sect arrived. At this moment, the Heavenly Yin Yang sect had definitely received the news, and it would take at least half a day to arrive at the land of 100 rivers from the Heavenly Yin Yang sect if all the preparations were included. As a result, the leader of the Bai clan knew very well that they only had a day at most. If they couldn't kill Xiaochen within a day, then the operation would end in failure. At that time, all of them would have no choice but to commit suicide and die for nothing. Even though they would all die in the end, killing Xiaochen and failing were 2 completely different things. If they could kill Xiaochen and be killed by the will of the Heavenly Way in the end, then their juniors would be taken care of by the Bai clan. If they failed, then Bai Mushuang's promise from before would be invalid. It was even to the extent that their juniors would have to be killed to prevent the news from spreading and bringing disaster to the entire Bai clan. They had to kill Xiaochen. That was what the 7 saints thought. At this moment, even though Xiaochen had heaved a sigh of relief, he still hadn't come into contact with danger. The request for help had been successfully sent out, but Xiaochen still had to persist during this period of time. He had to deal with these people until the experts of the Heavenly Yin Yang sect arrived. Xiaochen didn't show any signs of slowing down at all. He and the 7 saints chased each other madly through the night sky. At the same time, the half-saints and Dao emperors in the dense forest naturally charged out of the forest and chased after Xiaochen. However, with their cultivations, they were clearly unable to catch up to Xiaochen. However, the 7 saints were constantly chasing after Xiaochen. Xiaochen still hadn't come into contact with danger, and it was already late at night in the Heavenly Yin Yang sect. Qianling was cultivating with his eyes closed when a voice transmission suddenly entered his ears. Your life is in danger. Come to the land of 100 rivers quickly. It was a short message. Qianling's eyes snapped open when he heard that, and he couldn't help but cry out in alarm. Third brother, he knew that Xiaochen had sent this message through the transmission talisman. He also knew that with Xiaochen's personality, his life was definitely on the line for him to say something like that. He knew Xiaochen's personality very well. Xiaochen wouldn't exaggerate anything. So since Xiaochen said that his life was in danger, there was no doubt that Xiao Zhao's life was on the line. Land of 100 rivers? That mission. Qianling knew that Xiaochen had gone to the land of 100 rivers, and the first thing he thought of was the mandatory mission issued by the Hall of Missions. He also realized that something was wrong, but now was not the time to think about it. He had to rescue Xiaochen as soon as possible. Qianling immediately got up and strode out of the room, ready to find the upper echelons of the heavenly Yin solar sect. Qianling knew very well that if even Xiaochen's life was on the line, they wouldn't be of much use even if they went. Therefore, he needed to borrow the power of the heavenly Yin solar sect. However, just as Qianling was about to leave the cave, he coincidentally bumped into Emperor Qing, who was hurriedly leaving. When Emperor Qing saw Qianling, he spoke first before Qianling could say anything. His face was filled with joy. "Brother Qianling, let me tell you a piece of good news. The ancestors have all come out of seclusion, and their cultivation bases have all broken through to the greater mastery of the quasi-saint stage." Ha! Xiao Sheng and the others had all come out of seclusion, and their cultivation bases had all broken through to the greater mastery of the quasi-saint stage. Qianling, who was originally in a bad mood, couldn't help but be delighted when he heard this. He didn't expect Xiao Sheng and the others to come out of seclusion at this time. Their luck was really heaven-defying. Originally, Qianling planned to ask the experts of the heavenly Yin solar sect for help. However, this would inevitably delay some time. Now that Xiao Sheng and the others had come out of seclusion and told them about the matter, it saved a lot of time. He could let the four of them go to the 100 Rivers first, and then let the experts of the heavenly Yin solar sect go. This way, it would undoubtedly save a lot of time. If they set off now, they would definitely be able to reach the 100 Rivers within 6 hours. This was the advantage of Xiao Sheng and the others coming out of seclusion. They didn't need to delay time like the heavenly Yin solar sect and could set off immediately. Delighted, Qianling couldn't care less about anything else and asked the Cyan Emperor anxiously, "Where are the ancestors now?" Hearing this, the Cyan Emperor also noticed Qianling's abnormality. However, before he could ask further, Qianling urged him. Finally, the Cyan Emperor said, "They are in Xiao Chen's cave residence." Knowing that Xiao Sheng and the others were in Xiao Chen's cave residence, Qianling didn't say a word. His figure moved and disappeared on the spot. Seeing this, the Cyan Emperor was even more confused. After being stunned for a moment, he quickly chased after him. He rushed all the way to Xiao Chen's cave residence. In the front hall, Qianling saw Xiao Sheng and the others. At the same time, Qin Shuru and the other 3 women, as well as Qin Yu and Bai Yi, were all present. Seeing Qianling striding over, Qin Yu was originally smiling and said, "Qianling, you're here." He originally wanted to say that Qianling was late, but before Qin Yu could finish his sentence, Qianling had already strode over to Xiao Sheng and the others. At the same time, sensing Qianling's abnormality, everyone looked at Qianling curiously. Under everyone's gaze, Xiao Sheng smiled and asked, "What's the matter? Why are you in such a hurry?" "Patriarch, Xiaochen is in danger. He is in the land of 100 Rivers." Xiaochen was in danger and had already sent a message asking for help. Hearing this, everyone's expression changed, especially Qin Shuru and the other 3 women, who immediately stood up. Qianling's words instantly made the atmosphere tense. After being slightly stunned, Xiao Sheng, who was sitting on the main seat, was the first to recover from his shock. The land of 100 Rivers? Randang, Binglian, Mingjia, the 4 of us will set off immediately. Qianling, go ahead and inform the Yin and Yang sect and ask them to send experts. The 4 of us will set off first. Xiao Sheng's thoughts coincided with Qianling's. The most important thing now was time. Therefore, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 headed towards the 100 Rivers land first. This was the best choice. When he heard Xiao Sheng's words, Qianling nodded without hesitation. "Okay, I'll go now." After saying that, Qianling turned around and left. Xiao Sheng and the other 3 didn't have time to chat with the others. They only said to Qin Shuru and the other 3 women, "Wait for us in the Yin and Yang sect. Don't go anywhere." After saying that, without waiting for the 4 women to reply, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 disappeared on the spot and flew toward the teleportation array in the Yin and Yang sect. Seeking collection, monthly votes, recommendation. Chapter 1356. Xiaoxin's group of 4 rushed to the land of 100 Rivers overnight, and Qianling immediately reported the matter to the higher-ups of the Taiyang sect. Of course, Qianling naturally couldn't see Yinyangzi, so he could only pass on a message through the elders. That was why he said it would take time. He responded immediately. At the same time, Xiaochen and the 7 saints of the Bai family were chasing each other in the night. Fortunately, there was no way to fly in the land of 100 Rivers, and there was no way to tear the void. Otherwise, Xiaochen would have been caught long ago. Even so, the gap between the two sides was constantly narrowing. After all, there was a gap in cultivation, so Xiaochen couldn't compare with the saints in terms of speed or spiritual power. In the long run, they would definitely catch up. Xiaochen thought that he could only think of a way to stall for time. He had to hold on until the experts of the Taiyang sect arrived. Xiaochen could feel that the 7 auras behind him were getting closer and closer. Their leader, in particular, was the one with the highest cultivation. He had reached the Saint Realm Great Mastery, so his speed was naturally the fastest. It could be said that he was taking the lead and was constantly approaching Xiaochen. Seeing that the distance was getting closer and closer, Xiaochen directly took out several talismans from his storage ring. It was obviously impossible to fight head-on. Xiaochen absolutely had no chance of winning against 7 saints. The only thing he could do now was to stall for time. Without the slightest hesitation, Xiaochen directly shot 5 talismans at the person behind him at the same time. The 5 talismans were all at the saint level, but in the face of the attack, the saint in the lead didn't have the slightest intention of dodging. Obviously, he planned to take the 5 talismans head-on. Even though he was a saint, he had to take 5 saint-level talismans head-on. However, he couldn't care less about that now. They were already destined to compete, so it didn't matter even if they had talismans. They had to kill Xiaochen before the Taiyang sect did. They had already disregarded life and death. With a loud rumble, the 5 talismans exploded, and the saint in the lead didn't dodge the attack. The power of the 5 talismans exploding at the same time was obviously not weaker than the attack of a saint. Sensing the terrifying aftermath from behind, Xiaochen didn't have time to breathe a sigh of relief before the saint in the lead rushed out of the smoke. His clothes were tattered, and at the same time, his aura had become somewhat weak. Obviously, the 5 talismans had caused him quite a bit of damage. Even so, in order to prevent Xiaochen from escaping, the saint in the lead still chose to take the attack head-on without hesitation. It was also because of this choice that Xiaochen couldn't use the 5 talismans to put any distance between them. He was determined to kill Xiaochen before the Taiyang sect. He approached Xiaochen step by step and shouted coldly, "Xiaochen, you can't escape. Today is the day you die." His words were filled with killing intent. Hearing this, Xiaochen frowned. These people were all desperados and didn't care about their own lives at all. He had no intention of replying. What a joke. This was a life-and-death chase. Xiaochen wasn't in the mood to talk nonsense with this saint. Staying alive was the most important thing. He had already raised his speed to the limit, but even so, the saint in the lead still caught up to Xiaochen 15 minutes later. Although he was quite injured, the saint in the lead blocked Xiaochen's path and stared at Xiaochen with murderous intent. At the same time, the other 6 saints arrived in an instant and surrounded Xiaochen. After the previous incident, the 7 saints had clearly learned their lesson. This time, in order to prevent Xiaochen from escaping again, the 7 of them directly sealed off all of Xiaochen's escape routes, not giving him any chance to escape. He was completely surrounded. At this moment, a helpless expression appeared on Xiaochen's face. He was still unable to escape. Now that he was surrounded, it would be extremely difficult for him to charge out. Since stepping onto the path of martial arts, this was the most dangerous situation Xiaochen had ever faced. From the current situation, this was already a situation of certain death. Facing 7 saints, all of whom were death servants, Xiaochen had no chance of survival at all. It could be said that he was already in a desperate situation, but after a moment of hesitation, Xiaochen's dustless sword instantly appeared in his hand. Even though it was a situation of certain death and he knew that he had no chance of winning, Xiaochen still had no intention of surrendering. Even if he died, he would still stand. Seeing Xiaochen draw out the dustless sword, the leading saint sneered, "Xiaochen, do you think you still have a chance of survival today? Give up resisting and I can give you a quick death." If you want to fight, then let's fight. Why talk so much nonsense?" Xiaochen sneered when he heard that. He had no intention of surrendering at all. When he heard Xiaochen's answer, the leading saint's face sank, and then he shouted coldly, "Then don't blame us. Kill." There wasn't much time to waste, so the leading saint roared furiously and was the first to attack Xiaochen. The other 6 saints didn't stand by idly when they saw that, and they all surrounded Xiaochen. The attack of 7 saints was naturally terrifying. Looking at the 7 saints attacking from different directions, Xiaochen showed a self-deprecating smile on his face. He then tightened his grip on the Wuchen sword and murmured softly, "That's right. Looks like this is the only way. Since that's the case, then let's fight one last battle." As soon as he finished speaking, a terrifying aura shot into the sky from Xiaochen. At the same time, the sword domain and laws of gravity instantly swept out and enveloped all of them. This time, the enemy's plan could be said to be flawless, and even the yin and yang sects were unable to rescue him in time. Moreover, even until now, Xiaochen still didn't know who was behind all of this. Who was it that didn't hesitate to pay such a painful price to kill him? After all, 7 saints, 100 half-saints, and Tao emperors. Such a force was completely sufficient to establish a formidable saint-rank sect. Using the strength equivalent to that of a saint-level sect just to kill him, this was a big deal. In the end, it seemed like he had taken the initiative. Right when Xiaochen was prepared to go all out and fight to the death, a furious shout suddenly resounded from afar. "Holy Son Xiaochen, Mingjing and Jingping have come to lend you a hand." Along with this voice, Xiaochen saw 4 figures dashing over swiftly from afar, and they were swiftly approaching him. Begging for a monthly vote, begging for a recommendation. Chapter 1357. These 4 figures were naturally Jingping and the other 3 from the Mingjing gang. They had sped all the way here from Ming City because they were worried that they wouldn't have enough time, so Jingping and the other saints had arrived first. As for the other members of the Mingjing gang, they had arrived later. They had thought that they were doomed, but who would have thought that Jingping would lead the Mingjing gang to suddenly charge in? Although Xiaochen hadn't had any contact with the Mingjing gang before, their sudden appearance undoubtedly gave Xiaochen a glimmer of hope. Compared to Xiaochen, the 7 saints from the Bai family were incomparably furious. They had thought that they were going to succeed, but who would have thought that such a situation would occur? "Damn it, the Mingjing gang has ruined our plans." The leader of the saints cursed coldly. He had naturally heard of the Mingjing gang and knew that they were actually stronger than the Celestial Tribute gang. Now that the Mingjing gang had suddenly intervened, the situation had spiraled out of control. Without giving the 7 saints from the Bai family much time to hesitate, Jingping and the other 3 arrived in front of Xiaochen in a few breaths of time. Jingping took the initiative to bow. "Holy Son Xiaochen, I am the leader of the Mingjing gang, Jingping. I heard that the Holy Son was in danger, so I came to help." Jingping didn't beat around the bush and spoke bluntly. Xiaochen didn't have time to think about Jingping's motives. He immediately replied with a smile, "You're too kind, Leader Zheng. Xiaochen thanks you in advance." The appearance of Jingping and the other 3 was indeed timely. While the 2 of them were talking, the leader of the Bai family said coldly, "Mingjing gang, are you sure you want to get involved in this mess?" His words were filled with anger. Jingping turned around and looked straight at the leader of the Bai family. He said calmly, "The Mingjing gang will definitely take care of this matter. No matter who you are, as long as the Mingjing gang is here today, you can harm the Holy Son Xiaochen." Jingping's words were filled with righteousness. Of course, it was also to leave a good impression on Xiaochen. After all, ever since the decision was made, Jingping and the entire Mingjing gang had been tied to Xiaochen. They could either protect Xiao Chen and achieve meteoric success, or they could die with Xiao Chen. The leader of the Bai family gnashed his teeth when he saw that Jingping wasn't backing down. They were about to succeed, but things had turned out to be so confusing. The Mingjin gang really didn't know what was good for them. Seeing that it was probably impossible to persuade Jingping to give up, the leader of the Bai family made a prompt decision and called out coldly, "Since the Mingjin gang wants to die, I'll fulfill your wish. Kill." There was no way out no matter what. As a result, the leader of the Bai family had no intention of letting go even though the Mingjin gang had interfered. No matter what, they had to kill Xiao Chen as long as he still had a breath left in him. With that, everyone began to engage in a chaotic battle. There were 7 saints from the Bai family, Jingping's group, and Xiao Chen. Jingping directly fought the leader of the Bai family while the other 3 saints from the Mingjin gang fought the other 3 saints from the Bai family as well. Jingping's group of 4 shared the pressure of the 4 saints for Xiao Chen. However, even then, Xiao Chen still had to face the encirclement of the 3 remaining saints. The Bai family's target was clearly Xiao Chen, so apart from the 4 saints who were being held back by Jingping's group, the other 3 saints all targeted Xiao Chen. The pressure was still great, but it was much better than before. Xiao Chen could deal with the 3 saints. After all, Xiao Chen's goal wasn't to defeat them, but to stall for time. Xiao Chen fought the 3 saints with the dustless sword in hand. During the battle, Xiao Chen didn't take the initiative to meet the 3 saints head-on. Instead, he adopted the strategy of using gentleness to overcome strength. He would dodge if he could, and only when he couldn't dodge would Xiao Chen choose to meet the 3 saints head-on. The 3 saints did possess an absolute advantage in their encirclement against Xiao Chen, but they didn't possess the ability to instantly crush Xiao Chen. Especially Xiao Chen's abnormal recovery ability, it caused them to be unable to speak of their suffering. The saints were in a chaotic battle, and it wasn't long before the remaining half-saints and Dao Emperor realm experts of the Bai family arrived as well. The saint who led the Bai family immediately shouted furiously when he saw this. "Kill! Surround and kill Xiao Chen with all your might." At this moment, he was being held back by Jingping and was completely unable to escape. So, he didn't hesitate to order the remaining saints of the Bai family to surround and kill Xiao Chen with all their might. Even though half-saints and Dao Emperors were practically no threat to Xiao Chen, even ants could bite an elephant to death when there were enough of them. So, having one more person would give them a slight chance. However, right when the members of the Bai family were about to attack, the members of the Mingjin gang had arrived from another direction. Even though their cultivations weren't at the same level and their quality was far inferior to the Bai family, they were huge in number, and there were over 1,000 of them. Along with the arrival of the Mingjin gang, Jingping didn't waste his breath and just shouted coldly, "Stop them!" Both sides entered into a chaotic battle. With the help of the Mingjin gang, the pressure on Xiao Chen had been reduced greatly. Even though Xiao Chen had fallen into a disadvantaged position by relying on the strength of the 100-tempered battle body, he was still bitterly holding on under the joint forces of the 3 saints. It was utterly impossible to kill Xiao Chen in a short period of time. As the intense battle continued, the sky gradually brightened, and the veil of night retreated, causing their gazes to descend onto the ground once more. After such a long period of intense battle, Xiao Chen was still brimming with energy, and he didn't seem exhausted at all. In the face of Xiao Chen's terrifying physical body, the 3 saints of the Bai family didn't know what to say. If it had been anyone else in such an intense battle, they would have definitely been seriously injured, if not completely injured. However, Xiao Chen was fighting 1 against 3. Even though he was on the defensive the entire time, Xiao Chen would quickly recover from the injuries inflicted by the 3 saints, and Xiao Chen's condition remained at peak condition the entire time. As the battle dragged on, the hearts of the Bai family grew heavier and heavier. The experts of the heavenly Yin and solar sect loomed over the hearts of the Bai family members like a mountain that they couldn't ignore, and they were under immense pressure. They had long been desperate to kill Xiao Chen, but unfortunately, they hadn't been able to find an opportunity to do so. It was during this intense battle that, without any warning, 4 terrifying auras appeared. These 4 auras had clearly surpassed the Saint Realm, and had reached the Quasi-Saint Realm. Damn it! How did they get here so quickly? Sensing the 4 powerful auras, the bi-family saint's face darkened, and his eyes were filled with resentment as he cursed in a deep voice. Begging for collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. Chapter 1358. Everyone knew that there were no quasi-sage great venerables in the land of 100 rivers. However, the sudden appearance of 4 quasi-sage great venerables auras meant that the experts of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sects had arrived. They didn't expect them to arrive so quickly. According to their estimation, it would take at least half a day for the experts of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect to arrive at the land of 100 rivers after receiving Xiao Chen's request for help. But now, only a little more than 8 hours had passed. This was simply too fast. The 4 quasi-saint great venerables auras rapidly approached. Then, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 appeared in front of everyone. In fact, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 had already entered the land of 100 rivers more than 15 minutes ago, but it took them some time to find Xiao Chen's whereabouts. It was also because Xiao Sheng had sensed the aftermath of the battle here that the 4 of them rushed all the way here. They didn't expect to really find Xiao Chen. At a glance, they saw Xiao Chen fighting fiercely with 3 saints. Seeing that Xiao Chen was fine, Xiao Sheng couldn't help but breathe a sigh of relief. It seemed that they had made it in time. At the same time, with the appearance of Xiao Sheng and the other 3, Xiao Chen, Jingping, and all the people of Mingzhen Gang who were still alive felt relieved. It seemed that they had made the right bet. The experts of the heavenly Yin and Taiyang sect had arrived, and there were 4 quasi-saint great venerables. With Xiao Sheng and the other 3 here, it was enough to sweep away the experts of the Bai family in front of them. Xiao Sheng's figure moved and immediately appeared in front of Xiao Chen. With a wave of his hand, a huge wave of spiritual energy broke out of his body and blasted the 3 saints who were besieging Xiao Chen away. There was no need to talk about the gap between quasi-saint great venerables and saints. The 3 saints were no match for Xiao Sheng at all and were seriously injured in one blow. Then, Xiao Sheng turned to look at Xiao Chen with a hint of joy in his eyes. Boy, you really don't give people any peace of mind. There was a hint of reproach in his words, which was normal. After all, Xiao Chen's life was indeed hanging by a thread this time. If it weren't for Jingping and Mingzhen Gang's help, and Xiao Sheng and the others' timely arrival, Xiao Chen would probably be a corpse now. In the face of Xiao Sheng's reproach, Xiao Chen was nothing. He smiled helplessly. Do you know who did it? Xiao Sheng asked Xiao Sheng. But he didn't have any clues. Of course. Zhao's is the Bai family. But in the face of Zhao's, Xiao Sheng's question, he didn't know who the mastermind was. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng didn't say anything more and turned to look at the Bai family. At the same time, Randang and the other 2 also came to Xiao Chen's side. Their eyes were flashing with strong killing intent. Faced with the oppression of Xiao Sheng and the other 3 quasi-saint great venerables, the leading saint of the Bai family knew that this operation had failed. With Xiao Sheng and the other 3 quasi-saint great venerables around, the Bai family would not be able to cause any trouble. He felt bitter in his heart. In the end, he still couldn't kill Xiao Chen. He took the initiative to distance himself from Jingping. Then, the leader of the Bai family took a deep look at Xiao Chen. His eyes were full of unwillingness, but in the end, this unwillingness turned into a strong death intent. In an instant, the leader of the Bai family seemed to have lost his vitality, and his eyes also lost their luster. The leader of the Bai family committed suicide by severing his own heart meridian. Indeed, he didn't have the slightest desire to live. Seeing the arrival of Xiao Sheng and the other 3, the leader of the Bai family directly chose to commit suicide. Following the leader's suicide, the other experts of the Bai family also chose to commit suicide. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng and the other 3 immediately prepared to attack. After all, they still didn't know who the mastermind was. If they didn't leave anyone alive, how could they get any useful clues from them? However, Just as Xiao Sheng and the other three were about to attack, Xiaochen shook his head and said, "Forget it. These people are all men of sacrifice. It's useless." It was almost impossible to get anything out of these people, so Xiaochen gave up this plan. Moreover, Xiaochen already had a suspect in his heart. The whole thing started with the compulsory mission. In other words, it was very likely that this matter was related to the mission hall. Someone had specially arranged this compulsory mission for him and lured him into the trap. Therefore, instead of wasting time on these unknown men of sacrifice, it was better to investigate the mission hall when he returned. Perhaps he would discover something. Xiaochen didn't let the four of them attack. Seeing this, Xiao Sheng and the other three nodded slightly and didn't stubbornly insist. The experts from the Bai clan quickly committed suicide one after another. None of them survived. It was likely that they knew that once the mission failed, they could only commit suicide. This was because they could not live. If they died, they could still protect their descendants and relatives. If they lived, Bai Mushuang would definitely think of ways to silence them and use this to destroy the evidence. At that time, it was very likely that their families would be implicated. The crisis was resolved with the collective suicide of the Bai family. At this moment, Jingping led the three saints of the Mingjin gang to Xiaochen again. He bowed to Xiaochen and the other three and said, "Chosen one Xiaochen, seniors. I have to thank gang leader Jing for this." Xiaochen smiled. No matter what, he was indebted to Jingping this time. Moreover, it was a great debt of gratitude, so Xiaochen's attitude towards Jingping was rather friendly. Jingping was naturally overjoyed by Xiaochen's attitude. Afterwards, the group headed to Ming City under Jingping's invitation. The Bai family had been wiped out, and Xiaochen had managed to escape unscathed. Compared to Xiaochen, who had survived the disaster, Lin Tianfeng, who was in the headquarters of the Celestial Tribute Society in Feng City, was in a particularly heavy mood. It was he who had helped the Bai family find Xiaochen's whereabouts. It wasn't difficult to investigate this matter. As long as Xiaochen wanted to, it was very easy to accomplish. Xiaochen was fine, and the experts of the Yin and Yang sects had arrived. If Xiaochen wanted to, the fate of the celestial faction could be imagined. Lin Tianfeng's face was extremely sunken as he sat alone in the main hall. It was also at this moment that the other two saints from the Celestial Society hurried in as well. They looked at Lin Tianfeng anxiously. "Gang leader, what do we do now? Xiaochen is fine, and the experts of the Yin and Yang sects have arrived. What should we do now?" The two saints were also panicking. However, Lin Tianfeng didn't answer their questions. It wasn't that he didn't want to answer, but that he didn't know how to answer. What could he do now? Run? That was obviously impossible. Fight to the death? That was no different from trying to smash a rock with an egg. Begging for your collection, begging for monthly votes, begging for recommendations. You're tuning into the Mythic Realms YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.